For the record, my name is Gabriela Coletta Zapata, District 1 City Councilor, and I'm the chair of the Boston City Council Committee on Government Operations. Today is October 10th, 2024. This hearing is being recorded. It is also being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-TV and broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and Fios Channel 964. Written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.go@boston.gov and will be made part of the record and available to all councilors. Public testimony will be taken at the end of this hearing, but in addition to that, we're going to sprinkle in some public testimony in between panelists. If you are interested in testifying, please email our central staff liaison, Megan Kavanaugh, at Megan, meghan.kavanaugh, KAVANAGH, at boston.gov for the link, and your name will be added to the list. There's also a sign-up sheet near the entrance of the door. Today's hearing is on docket 0996, Home Rule Petition for a Special Act regarding ranked choice voting in Boston. This matter was sponsored by Councilors Louis-Jean, Mejia, and Santana, and was referred to the committee on June 12, 2024. Today, I am joined by my colleagues in order of arrival: Councilor and Council President, Madam Louis-Jean, Councilor Aaron Murphy, Councilor Julie Mejia, and Councilor Henry Santana. I'll go to the lead sponsors first for any opening remarks they have, and then I will outline the agenda. Councilor Louis-Jean.
Thank you, Chair Coletta. Good morning, everyone. Today is a beautiful day for democracy in the city of Boston. I am very happy to be here and honored to be presenting this home rule petition alongside my colleagues, Councilor Mejia, Councilor Santana, both at-large colleagues, and grateful for my colleagues who are here. But really, this is a home rule petition that we're bringing forward, but it is one delivered to us by the people. And so I want to thank the coalition involved in uplifting ranked choice voting. It is an important decision for our city and one that will ultimately be left up to our voters. Voting is at the core of democracy, but it is not infallible. As we've seen over the years, our electoral system can be vulnerable if it is not nurtured and strengthened. We are in a project of democracy building, and ranked choice voting does just that. Today, I ask that we consider a method that will make our elections more fair, inclusive, and representative of all Boston residents. So what exactly is ranked choice voting? It's simple. It's a system where voters can pick more than one candidate. Instead of just voting for one candidate, they're ranking their choices: first, second, third, and so on. What this means is that their vote always counts, even if their favorite candidate doesn't win. And let's talk about why that matters. Right now, our current voting system limits voters to selecting just one candidate, which can feel like you're forced to make a tough choice between a rock and a hard place, especially when there are many strong candidates. With ranked choice voting, you can vote for the candidate you truly support without worrying about spoilers or that you'll lose your voice if you don't win. Ranked choice voting encourages a broader, more positive campaign environment. Candidates will need to appeal to a wider range of voters to earn those second, third, and even fourth choice rankings. This leads to more focus on issues that matter to the community and less on negative campaigning or any mudsliding. Beyond the mechanics, ranked choice voting is about fairness. In many cities where it has been adopted, such as Maine, Alaska, and even right here in Massachusetts, in East Hampton and Cambridge, ranked choice voting has allowed more voices to be heard, more diverse candidates to win, and a greater empowerment among voters. It ensures that the winner is someone who has the broad supportive community, which overall leads to more trust in elections. By adopting ranked choice voting, we can ensure that our elections reflect our true values. It's also important to note that the proposal builds on something that we've already done here in Boston. As voters in 2020, while Massachusetts as a whole ended up not voting on the statewide RCV proposal, 62% of Boston voters supported it. The people of our city are ready for this change. And as someone who's a lawyer and worked on a ranked choice voting recount in Maine, where ranked choice voting did have a huge impact on congressional representation in that district in Maine, I know that ranked choice voting creates an environment where the candidate that has a majority of supportive voters is the candidate that wins, without us having to worry so much about the spoiler effect. Ranked choice voting offers a more inclusive, transparent way to elect our leaders. It empowers voters to fully express their preferences, encourages positive campaigning, and ensures that the candidate with the broadest support so the candidates with the broadest support are elected. I'm confident this change will benefit Boston. I'm confident in the abilities of our fabulous elections department. I'm excited to work with all of you to make it happen. Thank you, and I look forward to hearing from our panelists today.
Thank you. Councilor Julie Mejia.
Good morning, everyone. This is what democracy looks like, right? I'm so happy to see this chamber with the voices of the people who are going to really help us understand why this moment in time requires Boston to be a little bit bolder and a little bit more innovative when it comes to our election and democracy making process. As someone who won by one vote, a very traumatic recount. We know that when you have candidates who are a little bit rough around the edges and a little bit on the margins, that when you run a campaign with very limited resources, you need all the support that you can get. And this provides an opportunity for us to really expand that pie and create opportunities for those who really are seeking representation. So I'm here today not only as one of the co-sponsors, but as an opportunity for us to really unpack the facts and the myths, and so that we can help people understand why this moment requires us to think a little bit bolder and be a little bit louder. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Santana.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chair. Thank you so much for convening us today, and very thankful for the lead sponsors, Council President Lujan and Councilor Mejia. And good morning to our audience here. I see many residents. I see many community leaders. I see East Boston in the house here, so very excited about that. You know, this initiative represents a significant step forward in our democratic process. Ranked choice voting empowers voters to fully express their preferences by allowing them to rank candidates in order of choice, fostering a more inclusive and representative electoral system. Transitioning from our current top 2 system to a top 4 system can better reflect broader community support and consensus. While new systems can bring uncertainties, as voters become familiar with ranked choice voting, its ability to simply the voting process will become cleaner. We've already seen strong support in ranked choice voting, as the Council President mentioned. And as City Councilor dedicated to fostering democracy and fair representation, I stand firmly in support of implementing ranked choice voting in Boston. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing from our panelists today to see how we can implement this here in the City of Boston. So really appreciate the opportunity, and looking forward to the conversation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to Councilor Erin Murphy, Weber, Pepin, and then Fitzgerald. Councilor Murphy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to waive my opening remarks. I know we have a lot of people waiting for public testimony and panelists, so I'm just happy to be here and be part of this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Councilor Weber.
Sure. Thank you. Just briefly, you know, anything that improves voter turnout and lets people think, you know, or lets people have more of a voice in how we work as a governing body, I support, and so I'm looking forward to being part of this conversation. And I hope to hear from the panelists, and I know we have a lot of people out here today. I look forward to hearing from them too.
Thank you, Councilor Weber. Councilor Pepin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. For me, it's an honor to be at this hearing today because I've been not shy of being a fan of ranked choice voting. I went to a very great event earlier in the year where we were able to rank empanadas, and I thought that was brilliant because, you know, it's about, do you like chicken or beef, or does everyone like ham and cheese? And it's about figuring out which is the one that people agree with the most. And one of the talking points and stats that I was able to get out of doing research about ranked choice voting is that it encourages candidates to knock on doors that you think they might not vote for you, but you have the opportunity to talk to someone that may have a different mindset and convince them that you guys could work together. And I think that is really necessary in a democracy in a city like Boston, where we may have different perspectives, but at the end of the day, we can decide on a candidate that there could be some consensus on and we can all work together with, which is why I'm a fan of ranked choice voting. I'm here to learn more, here to ask how it's going to work with our election department in the City of Boston, and to also hear from the community advocates that are in the room. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Councilor Pepin. Councilor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair. Very happy to be here today to discuss this and learn more about the issue of ranked choice voting. I certainly have some questions, and I look forward to learning from the panel and educating us on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and as my colleagues come in, I will recognize them and make sure that they get an opportunity to provide any opening statements that they have. I do just want to say I have full confidence in our elections department, and I have full confidence in our voters to understand this proposal and how to move forward. I do have questions about how to operationalize this and how it will impact your work, what city resources we need to invest to make sure that this is successful. And then on the flip side, what an adequate public education campaign for voters will look like to empower them in this process. I think that second part is key, because we have heard from folks that voters are confused and they don't necessarily know what to do in the ballot box. And so my goal is to make sure that we avoid that and to look at the merits of this proposal and then be very honest about the legislative pathway forward for this proposal. So for today's hearing, we'll start with opening statements from the Elections Department. Questions from my council colleagues will be for 6 minutes each, and I do have the clock. We have a lot of folks here that want to provide testimony, so we'll be very diligent about that. We'll go to public testimony, and then following that, we'll take testimony from an advocacy panel, and then our my colleagues will have 4 minutes each to ask questions, and then we'll go back again to public testimony with an adjournment. I know this is kind of ambitious, but with an adjournment at 12:30 or 1 o'clock. So I'm grateful for you all for being here. I know that the Elections Department is currently organizing workers for this upcoming election, so I know it is a busy time, so I thank you for being here. My understanding is that you have a 12 p.m. hard stop, Anita. I'm hopeful that somebody from the Elections Department can still stay to listen to the advocacy panel. So with that, I'll pass the floor over to you at your discretion of who wants to go first with an opening statement. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, Madam President Lujan, Councilor Mejia, Chair Coletta Zapata, and committee members. My name is Ineda Tavares. I'm the chair of the Board of Election Commissioners. I'm joined by my head registrar, Sabina Pamonti, and we appreciate the opportunity to be here today to discuss docket number 0996, the Home Rule Petition for a Special Act regarding ranked choice voting in Boston. Currently, our main focus at the Election Department is on the November 5th state election. Everyone is working hard to ensure everything runs smoothly, from in-person early voting, which is scheduled to begin on October 19th, to vote-by-mail ballot collection, which is already underway, through Election Day, and the certification process that takes place afterward. We are currently processing and sending over 92,000 absentee and vote-by-mail ballots, training and staffing over 1,800 poll workers to serve across 25 early voting sites, which provide 54 different opportunities to vote, and 275 Election Day polling locations, as well as coordinating the delivery and return of election materials to each site. We always strive for efficiency and accuracy in conducting our elections, especially with the expected high turnout for this critical election. This does mean more work to meet our goals while following regulations from both the city and the Commonwealth. If ranked choice voting is adopted in the city of Boston, it will have a significant impact on our current operation. Based on initial feedback we have received, we expect higher costs in areas of programming and ballot printing, as well as extended time for counting ballots and certifying the election. We would also need to consider investing in newer model voting equipment to reduce the processing time for each ballot. Based on our knowledge of ranked choice voting, one big advantage is that it can eliminate the need for multiple elections. The focus on elections should be placed on ensuring that every voter has access and that every vote is counted. And election results should be produced with precision and accuracy without setting a specific time for when election results are posted. We have reached out to other municipalities to discuss their experiences with ranked choice voting, but we do not expect to discuss them in full until after the election. Similarly, we have discussed costs and procedure changes with our equipment vendors, but we will not know the true costs and certification details until we have a full understanding of the regulations that will be implemented. We will continue to follow the most recent and up-to-date regulations and guidelines from the city and the Commonwealth and will explore changes to procedures if ranked choice voting is implemented in the city of Boston. We look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Sabino, do you have any opening testimony?
No, I'm just here to listen in and take notes and try to help.
Great. All right, we will go to my colleagues. I just want to have we been joined by anyone? No, I thought we were. All right. I do just want to say that we had reached out as well to the Secretary of State's office. I just want to be able to read their response. Michelle Tassinari, who is the General Counsel and the Director of the Elections Division, she said that she was unable to attend due to preparations for the election. She further stated that this office has no position on the City of Boston's proposal for ranked choice voting. In the normal course, we would be asked to review legislation when it is submitted to the legislature. We also invited Tanya Ford from the City of Cambridge Elections Commission, who was unable to attend due to preparations for the elections. At this time, I will pass it over to the lead sponsors for questions. You have 6 minutes, starting with Councilor Louis-Jean.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I then want to thank you, Commissioner and Registrar, for being here. I know that the election is upcoming and it's taking a lot of your time, but we appreciate you being here, and the coalition behind this appreciates you being here. I have 4 buckets of questions, one about implementation and feasibility, the next about voter education and outreach, managing potential issues, and then cost and resources. Commissioner, you spoke to a few of them. I want to start with voter education and outreach because every election cycle, especially at our local elections and especially in primaries, we hear about, there's a lot more that we could be doing around voter education and around making sure that people have the information necessary to understand. And as someone who's worked on a ranked choice voting race, I know that oftentimes the word confusion is thrown out there, but when I was reviewing the ballots, voters really understand pretty clearly how ranked choice voting works. And so I'm curious, what do you think the resources will need to not only, both without ranked choice voting, how do we improve on voter education and outreach? And then once we have ranked choice voting, what do you think those resources would look like and require?
Thank you for the question. In terms of voter outreach, I think directly reaching the voters is one huge way a huge success, I would say, area for us. I think this department in the last 5 years has moved towards directly reaching voters through mailers and making sure that we provide clear instructions, whether it is through re-precincting or election day polling locations and in-person early voting. I think that is the most effective way to reach voters, as well as making sure that our folks that are on the ground assisting voters are well trained, and that we're providing language access in every single polling location to make sure if there is a barrier with communication, that there's someone there who can effectively assist the voter. Because sometimes mailers are overlooked. We do our due diligence to send things to every single household, but they're overlooked. But making sure that our frontline workers are well trained and well versed on the procedures.
Have you seen an uptick in voter turnout as a result of the efforts of your office?
I think we've seen a slight uptick in voter turnout with the combination of in-person early voting, vote by mail, and election day voting in general. I can't say it is the direct result of the mailer.
Okay. Do you think that that's the voter education work that you're doing could continue should Boston implement a ranked choice voting system?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Question about cost and resources that you talked about, and I know that the advocate panel will speak to this later. I know that you said that you reached out to other cities that have ranked choice voting, and you reached out to vendors. My understanding is that for a lot of places that implement ranked choice voting, it really will just be like a software. In some situations, it's a software update, or it's turning on a software functionality, which means that cost could be the cost for maybe adding that software, but not necessarily having to purchase completely new hardware. Is that your understanding, or what's your understanding of the costs involved?
Again, until we understand the full details of implementation, we really can't speak to it. However, in just our initial conversations with our vendor, if we moved in this direction, I would recommend going to entirely new voting machines to speed up the processing time. for the ballots. We don't want any bottleneck at any precinct, and moving to ranked choice voting is going to slow down the processing time for each ballot. It's going to change the ballot layout, the ballot processing time. Currently, with the voting machine that we have, it takes approximately 35 to 45 seconds to process each ballot. If we move to ranked choice voting, it will take about 1 minute per ballot. So we do need to move to our most recent model of voting equipment, which could take costs almost $2 million.
Okay, and is that, you wouldn't be looking for that upgrades to that voting equipment in the next 2 years, but for an implementation of ranked choice voting? So you're fine with the voting hardware as it currently exists, but ranked choice voting would add that layer on?
That's correct.
Okay. Question about how you currently handle voter complaints about confusion or when people need help at the polls. Like, what is the process? I guess first for when people need help at the polls, and then second when people complain about they didn't understand the voting process.
We don't get many complaints about people not understanding the voting process, to be honest. However, we do get phone calls for people who may need assistance understanding the process, and oftentimes it's more a language barrier. And we do have a phone bank in our office, in addition to staffing all of the precincts with the required languages based on demographic. We staff a phone bank in the election department on election day, and the voters can, and poll workers can dial into that phone bank. We have been working closely with language access as well to just ensure that we have additional resources, additional phone numbers that our poll workers can call for language assistance.
Thank you. And our poll workers, sometimes if a voter is asking about, they don't understand a particular process, poll workers are empowered to explain a matter to a voter. Is that right?
That is correct. They are trained before every single election on how to assist a voter, the proper way to assist a voter, making sure that there's two people assisting a voter so that there's never any complaint from the voter's side that they were influenced in any way, but just solely received instruction.
Thank you. And then are there contingency plans in place to address potential issues with election equipment or vote counting during once the election is happening?
That is correct. We do have rover teams that are responsible for each district. If something comes up, there are contingency plans. We have a hand count compartment for our voting machines. If there is an issue, they are instructed to use the hand count compartment until anything is resolved. And then once the issue with the machine is resolved by our rover teams, then it's fully functionable again.
Okay, thank you. I'm out of time, so I just want to say thank you again for being here and for your questions. Also, we need more poll workers, so people sign up to be poll workers to help out at the election. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Mejia?
Okay. Thank you. So what I'm really excited about is this whole conversation around modernizing, right? We have an opportunity in this moment, it's 2024, to really think differently about what voter engagement and also the function of how we vote looks like. So I'm just curious, when was the last time the elections department did an upgrade in our election, whether it's machines, when was the last, are we working from things from the 1990s? Are we in 2000s? Where are we with our own ability to be more modern?
All of our voting equipment was updated in 2019, so we moved to the more recent model, which is the ImageCast precinct tabulator.
Okay, so we're meeting the moment.
Yes.
We're more modern. Okay, I like that. Now, my question is, can you explain to us, especially for those folks, I always think it's important for people to understand because I believe that information is power and it's also a privilege. There are a lot of people who understand things and a lot of people still need to figure things out. So for the record, can you help us understand, I'm an at-large city councilor, and right now, when we run, there, maybe 21 people are in the election. In the primary, you whittle it down to 8, and then from the 8, 4 move on, right? That's how it works. 4 win, yeah, 4 win. So I should know that. But I think I'm still traumatized by the fact that I barely got in here. But I think it's important for us to just kind of help people understand who are paying attention. how is the at-large similar to ranked choice voting, what we're trying to do for the district? Can you see a correlation between that?
I can kind of see a correlation with that. However, it's also similar to the plurality voting for district councilors, except for there are 4 seats for the at-large candidates as well, and you get 4 choices, which is why it requires that extra explanation on the ballot as well, that you can vote up to 4 candidates for the at-large race.
So would it just be a matter of just adding that language on the district side of things so that you are educating folks?
We would have to add that clear instruction on the ballot for voters, yes.
And would that cost extra ink?
There will be an increase in printing costs because the entire layout of the ballot will change. Not only will the instruction change, but the layout of the ballot will change. We'd probably have to move to a portrait-style ballot, which would have to be double-sided as well, which with one set of races on one side and another one on the back.
And so what would be the estimated cost for that change?
We don't know for certain what the estimated cost would be for that change unless we fully understand, because it can vary from election to election depending on how many candidates are running.
Okay. And what have you seen are best practices from other cities who have successfully managed to implement ranked choice voting? What lessons have you learned? What things can you share with us?
Again, we haven't had too many detailed conversations. I did speak to East Hampton, but it's really difficult. We're hoping to have conversations with larger municipalities that are comparable to Boston, because we are unique in our size, our demographics, so there's other things that we experience here that these smaller municipalities do not experience.
I'm going to ask a historical question, and I think I'm not sure who would be the best to answer it. And Sabina, I'm looking at you because I probably are the genie in the bottle when it comes to all things that deal with elections. And I'm curious about, do you remember when, I think the city was once upon a time all at large, and then it moved to district?
It was in the early 80s, I believe.
But you weren't born then, you're trying to say? But okay, from you didn't have to be, I'm not saying that you were working here then, but what do you, if any, information do you have about when that transition happened, when we went from all at large to districts? Because I'm sure that there was a change then, right, in terms of how we get the information out, and it was in the 80s and we weren't as digitally savvy, so I'm just curious if there's any historical knowledge that we can share here about big, bold changes that the city made once upon a time and they managed to do so successfully.
I don't have any information on that, but we can go to something that's a little bit more recent with re-precincting. Re-precincting was a big change in the city that hasn't taken place in over 100 years, and we did do a decent job with getting that information out to the voters that were affected.
Yeah. So then it sounds like to me that with the proper resources, because we are going to have, if we do this, we're going to have to fund it, right? And I think that if this is what the will of the voters is, then we're going to have to figure out how we make it happen. And I think that it's important for us to understand kind of like what the magnitude is in terms of resources and staffing, so that we can help set you up for success. And I think that if you can demonstrate that you've managed to do something successfully once, even with redistricting, because everybody knows who was paying attention to that, that was an emotional process and also a very taxing one, but we did it. And so what did you learn from that process?
If I can just add to that, Counselor, I'll add to that. I will say in the elections department, we have experienced a significant change in how we conduct elections over the last few years, and we have successfully implemented a number of procedures and successfully advertised and ran a campaign for each one, from in-person early voting to 2016, where we hired an advertisement firm to help with all of our communications, to vote by mail in 2020 and redistricting. I think we have done an excellent job, if you ask me, of actually informing residents and voters of all of the changes. So we would definitely take the same approach with this, should it be implemented.
Yeah. So I'm encouraged by that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. I just want to recognize we've been joined by Councilor Flynn, Councilor Santana, and then Councilor Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Sabino, for being here, and thanks to my colleagues for great questions. My understanding, Commissioner, is that you're not in a position right now to talk about specific numbers because as you're gathering data in terms of pricing, can you speak to, I think you talked about new machines that will need to be purchased in order, if ranked choice voting was to be adopted here. Can you just talk about the general expenses of like one-time costs versus, costs that are going to happen every year? So like the machines will be a one-time cost, right? So can you just, and then can you speak to more of just like, I know you spoke about the actual ballot itself. That will be a long-term cost of every year, right? Depending on how many candidates there are. Are there any other expenses that we're missing here?
Again, we won't have a full picture of the expenses until all of the procedures, all of the details of implementation are ironed out. There are a lot of things that have to be factored in with implementing ranked choice voting. Election night results is one of them. How we adjudicate any ballots that come back from the precincts will be another thing to factor in. As it stands, when we have write-in ballots and hand count ballots, right now the poll workers can tally those ballots, have to tally it at the precinct in our clerk's books and return the clerk's books to the election department. With ranked choice voting, hand count ballots cannot be processed to the machine. It would require an adjudication process where those ballots have to come. We would have to determine if we would establish a full-time board. We have some part-time members right now, a full-time board to take days after the election to go through each hand count, vote on what the intent of the voter was, prepare a clean ballot so that it can be processed through the voting machine in order for the algorithms to be run to determine who the winner is. So there's just a number of things that have to be ironed out before we determine full costs. That could lead to increased work, increase overtime for our department as well. So again, there's still a lot of work to do to dive into the actual cost of implementation.
No, absolutely. Completely understand. Commissioner, in your opening statements, you touched on a positive thing, right? If ranked choice voting was to be implemented, and you mentioned less elections, right? I think the special elections are happening. Can you just speak to the special elections we've had, not specifically in regards, but like just special elections, how much they cost, and then, I think just for the audience, how would ranked choice voting actually stop special elections from happening, if that's what you were referring to?
Not necessarily.
Okay,
I
so
don't think we can prevent
please.
special elections from happening because they're triggered by, it could be a resignation, there could be a number of things that trigger a special election, so I don't know that would impact.
So you mentioned there will be fewer elections.
Well, okay, so of the municipalities that we have spoken to, or the municipalities in Massachusetts, they do not require a preliminary election. They only have one election with ranked choice voting, so there is no prelim.
Okay, I see what you're saying. And I guess with special election, the way I interpreted it was that, if someone was to resign, a special election right now under our system right now, a special election will happen with ranked choice voting because you will have votes from other candidates. Would that not be the way? Right now in the at-large level, right? If one of us was to resign, the fifth place winner would come up and finish the term. Would that happen with ranked choice voting with district councilors given?
That would have to be determined by legislative changes.
Okay. No, thank you. Great. And then I think, are there any other challenges that you have all thought about by implementing ranked choice voting outside of pricing and more investments, potentially, I think potentially investing in more staff for you and overtime? Are there any other challenges that we have not spoken about today yet?
Did I touch on? Do you?
Touch on everything.
I think those are
The main
some
ones,
of our main yes.
Okay, great. Well, no, thank you, Madam Chair. That's all for my questions.
Thank you, Councilor Santana. Councilor Murphy, and then Councilor Weber.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Some of these questions you've already touched on, but what plans for voter education outside of, you mentioned like implementing the flyers and the mailers, which you have been doing successfully, would you think would be needed? Not just for the voters, but thinking also for our poll workers and, the election department.
We would definitely have to train our poll workers in advance. We have, in the past, held like large community meetings to make sure that we're reaching out to residents. We will continue our social media campaigns. I think that's something that we're increasing as well. And videos, just videos instructing voters and just demonstrating what the process will look like.
And when you send out the flyers and mailers, are you sending it only to registered voters or all residents?
We are sending it to registered voters.
Okay. Right. Just thinking how, in some precincts we have less than 10% turnout, but I think all of the residents, if they vote or not, need to get this education, this information, so there's an understanding, right? So are we thinking about those bigger, like, community meetings? Like, how long would you feel confident if you were doing, going around to different neighborhoods and showing up at community meetings? How many and how long do you think it would take for your office, for you to feel confident that we've done a good job educating the voters on this new process?
I can't speak to the time frame. At the moment, again, we would have to just come up with a very strategic plan to target every single neighborhood, to target every single household. There's times where we mail directly to voters, depending on what it is, but there are other times where we target the household. Mm-hmm. And this probably would be an instance where we would target the household as well, and provide opportunities for anyone who's not registered to register as well.
Okay. Councilor Santana touched on the cost implications, and when you already mentioned it would be about $2 million if we were to, change the voting machines, the cost of the new ballot also. So any other costs that you think would be big ticket costs other than, education and outreach?
Not at the moment.
No. Okay. Also, any concerns on monitoring the integrity of the process? Being able to accurately count and make sure that we're prepared for that.
No.
You feel confident? Yeah.
Yes. Our vendor is accustomed to this voting mechanism. I think it would be similar process to what we do now to ensure that every single vote is counted.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy. Councilor Weber.
Thank you, Chair. I guess, so if there's a change in the ballot, who determines what the ballot looks like if we implement this?
That would be between us and our equipment vendor who has experience formatting these ballots and following regulations from the state.
Okay. And then I just, a dumb question, like, what does it look like when you're ranking candidates? How would you imagine that? I mean, you're not just writing a number, you're filling in circles. Just walk me through what that would look like.
Considering I've never voted on a ranked choice voting ballots, I've only seen samples. I would envision the race with the candidate and then a number of ovals beside the name of the candidate. So now, rather than having just one oval that they would fill, they would have ovals with numbers 1 through 4, and then they would rank their choices accordingly.
Okay. So, Sabino, is it?
Yeah, I just want to say, it's like filling out your SATs when you did SATs or MCAS. So it's pretty much the same vein, candidate, bunch of columns with ovals next to them, and then you just have to use the right column for how you want to rank them.
Okay. And I guess, so in terms of outreach, I mean, I imagine most of the education would occur at the polling station on election day, but maybe I'm wrong about that. I mean, what kind of staffing do you think you would need at a polling station that you don't have now? Would there be any additional people that you need at the polling location?
I think we would have to run a campaign before this is implemented, just to bring voters up to speed and the residents up to speed on this different voting process, in addition to staffing the current poll workers that we have. So we would still staff the number of voters that we staff. We're required to have a warden, a clerk, 4 inspectors, and interpreters at every single precinct. We will continue to do that. We would make sure that they are well trained on the new voting process, but in addition to that, we would run a campaign well in advance of Election Day.
Okay. I mean, I think despite your best intentions and people will be educated, they'll still have questions, you know, especially the first few times going through this, like, how does this work? So I kind of feel like you might need somebody there to, you know, people are just going to want to know before they fill this out that their votes are going to be counted. And so you said, so new machines across the district, would those speed up the time that you said, right, you know, you think with the old machines it would take a minute or so, would the new machines take less time?
Yes, they would.
Okay. I guess, so you said there would be cost savings due to preliminaries. Like, for example, I think in the districts, if you, right now, I think it's, if you have more than 2, if you have 3, you have a preliminary. But my understanding is if this gets enacted, then you'll need 5 people to have a preliminary in a district race. If you have 4, if you have more than 4, is that your understanding?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, and then so what kinds of cost savings would we have? I'm assuming there would be at least some preliminaries that would happen under the current system that wouldn't happen under ranked choice voting. Can you estimate that, like, if we in a district race that would have had a preliminary that we no longer have, what the cost savings are?
Well, that would all depend, because it could be one district that doesn't have a race, but another district that does. For example, was it last year's election? We had a race in about 3 or 4 districts, so that would all depend on the number of districts that would require an election. If it's a mayoral election, even if we don't have the district races, we still have a citywide election with mayoral, because it's a citywide office as well as the at-large candidates.
Well, no, so I just using the last election, I think most of the district preliminaries were 3, except for Councilor Fitzgerald's district or more. And so if you went from 3 or 4 preliminaries to 1, would there be a cost savings there?
Yes, there would be.
Okay. And is that in like the hundreds of dollars? Can you estimate what that would be? Just looking at the last election.
I'll turn it over to Sabina for numbers. Can you?
Yeah, I mean, based upon the numbers that we can gather, it costs roughly $1 million to run a citywide election, but that's not including all the chargebacks that we get from other agencies that do assist us, like police and schools and so on and so forth. So there is a huge savings that we would have if there is no preliminary, including our staff as well. That means that we don't have to work these extra grueling hours to mail out ballots and process all those ballots and get them all counted in central tabulation and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's certainly, I mean, we haven't talked about it, but the mental health of our election department employees, I think is something that we all care deeply about, and anything we can do to help ease their burden would be great too. So thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Weber. I want to thank my colleagues for respecting the clock. I really appreciate it. Councilor Pepin, and then Councilor Fitzgerald. And we've also been joined by Councilor Liz Braden.
Thank you, thank you, Madam Chair. So, shout out to my colleagues for asking a lot of great questions, taking them off my list here. But it seems like ranked choice voting would lead to some potential cost savings. We would need new machines, which would cost money, but ultimately lead to a better system. As a commissioner, do you foresee more benefits or more obstacles by using ranked choice voting in the future?
Administratively, it would definitely increase the workload for our department. Could it be a potential value for the voters? Perhaps, but from our perspective in administering elections, it would definitely create a challenge for us.
Okay. Okay. No, that's just like to put things into perspective in terms of workload and everything. In terms of timing, I don't know if this is more of a Sabino question. Would it change the timing that a person has to say they want to be a candidate, or would it change the amount of signatures a district councilor needs to obtain in order to get on the ballot?
From my understanding of how the home rule petition is currently written, it does not speak to any of that, so I imagine that all of that would remain intact.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Honestly, the question that I had been, Councilor Weber, you beat me to them. So I'm going to give back my time. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Pepin, Councilor Fitzgerald, and then Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Chair. Just two comments before I get into the specific questions. I do feel that panel one and talking to the administration is a little putting the cart before the horse. We should probably talk about before we talk about implementation, we should be talking about, if this is a good or bad thing overall. I appreciate you being here. I do have some questions. Also, Chair, just a question. We don't have a panel on anybody that is, it seems there's a pro-ranked choice voting panel in panel 2, but we don't have anyone representing the other side of this by any means, right? Or no one has offered to come. I just usually like to hear both sides, right? To really make, as someone who's on the fence about this type of issue, I usually like to be able to ask, and for all of us to be able to ask questions of both sides.
Councilor Fitzgerald, just really quick, I'm not aware of any coalition that is organizing against this question, but anybody's welcome to provide public testimony.
No, great point, and thank you for that, Chair.
Yep.
Commissioner, on average, right, how many incidents of voters registering a complaint happen in an election, and maybe this might be the same or different question, how many ballots are discounted on average because of not properly filled out or anything like that?
Ballots are not typically discounted because they are not filled out properly. The only ballot that is typically discounted would be a provisional ballot, and that is typically someone who is not registered to vote, who believes that they have the right to vote. They would then cast a provisional ballot. It would come back to our office. We would further research that ballot to determine whether or not that person was eligible to vote, and that's when we would determine if the ballot counts or not.
So that we don't have any incidents of where a ballot is not properly filled out by an identified voter that is for any reason? I mean, how does that?
So if there is, let's give a scenario, if it's the at-large race perhaps, is a citywide election, someone overvotes the at-large race because they selected 5 candidates rather than 4, we would have to assign a blank to all the write-in candidates because we wouldn't be able to determine what the intention of the voter was or who the top 4 candidates were. But everything else on that ballot would be counted.
Okay, so it would literally be the specific race on that ballot if it was for some reason, for a myriad of reasons, not filled in properly or
That's
a mistake.
correct.
Okay, good to know.
Can I just add to that?
Please.
If the voter is at a precinct and voting, the machine will reject that ballot as an overvote. That voter will then have a chance to get an additional ballot, so they will spoil that ballot and have a chance to mark that ballot correctly.
Okay.
So there is 3 chances that that voter can have before that ballot gets, like Commissioner said, blanked out for that particular.
So if they filled it out incorrectly 3 times, they
The
lose.
third one counts no matter what.
The third one would count no matter what, even if overcounted or anything
That's
like
correct.
that. Okay, and how would it count it?
It will be a blank for that race.
The blank for the vote.
So if they overvote it, it becomes a blank.
Okay, Thank you very
The
much.
other races are counted.
And I just want to add, speaking of modernization, that's the value of our new voting equipment now, is that it has a large display screen and it beeps and informs the voter that there is an issue with the ballot.
Yep, great. Obviously, I just think what I'm getting at is that there's an opportunity for an increase. I just was wondering what the average was now of complaints saying my vote, my vote didn't count, or for whatever reason it was, not properly counted by the machine, and the potential likelihood of more incidences occurring. I just wonder what the delta might be over time. Obviously, we don't know the answer, but thank you. I guess also in any change to technology or layout, as we've identified as how this would be implemented, there's always difficult hurdles to overcome. We can just look at Zoom on our busing, our school buses, and there's always going to be a bumpy road, right, when a new technology is implemented into something. I just wonder, in an election, is that, how do we introduce new technology into an election? Because if there is the possibility of the bumpiness and the hurdles and the things you have to learn about implementing new technology, an election is such an important part, right? I mean, to get right. How do we make sure that there aren't mistakes in new technology, new layouts to apparel, and what that might do to voters coming in that first time,
So I would say for every election, everything is well tested a number of times before anything is deployed to a precinct. We have had times with the implementation of new voting equipment. We did have an event where we set up these machines. Voters could vote on a mock ballot and just test the new voting equipment altogether. We definitely would want to introduce this maybe during an odd year election. It's usually the easiest way to implement any new technology when it comes to elections, because it just minimizes the chance of anything going wrong, or it helps us to have a smaller pool to work with if we do have to address anything.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Chair, that's all my questions. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Councilor Fitzgerald, Councilor Flynn, and Britton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the panel. I believe the proposal for ranked choice voting is complicated, expensive. I think there'll be delays. And actually, the person with the most votes may or may not win. So I am somewhat troubled by that. I also think it presents an opportunity for city council candidates to run as a slate, to run as a block. The top vote getter in the preliminary could really work with 3 or 4 candidates for the final election in November and run that slate and win. Is that a possibility, Sabino?
I assume so.
Commissioner, is that a possibility?
We really can't speak to the campaign strategies.
No. But do you see what my point is? If the top vote getter in the preliminary wants to work with the person that finished 5th and 6th, then that top vote getter might be able to get the person that finished 4th, 5th, and 6th into the top 4. Do you see that as a problem?
That's a possibility, but again, I can't speak to how candidates collaborate with one another to run a campaign, just purely the administrative process.
Oh, just administrative. Okay, no, I understand. It would take time at the end of the night to count the votes. It's a more complicated system in terms of counting. Is that accurate to say?
Yes.
And to feed the ballot into the system, into the voting booth there to count it. Now it takes 30 seconds with ranked choice, and it could take over a minute.
Correct.
Okay. Besides it taking a longer process, what other issues would it present on election night in terms of counting the votes? Or I know right now we do count the votes the mail-in ballots, we count them actually before Election Day. So you know the results sometimes a week before from the mail-in ballots. Is that accurate?
That is not accurate. We cannot look at or release results until after 8 p.m. on Election Day. We do advanced process, meaning we've checked in those voters, we've run it through the voting machine, but the results itself are unknown until after 8 p.m.
But you do count them before, several days before Election Day. Is that accurate?
We start depositing them, yes.
Did that happen this time in September?
Yes, it did.
Okay. Were there any issues as it relates to this coming presidential election? Are you expecting any issues in terms of counting the ballots?
No.
Sabino? Did we have any issues counting the ballots in September?
No.
Sabino? What was the reason that the legal counsel and the chief policy person were at the election department on election night?
I report to the chief counsel. The election department is under, that is the cabinet that I.
But is that normal that they come every election night?
Yes, it is.
And what time do they usually arrive?
Later on in the evening, usually.
To certify the results, or?
No, he usually checks in early in the morning at 6 a.m., pops his head in, checks in, makes sure everything is okay, and then he also comes back at the end of the evening. We also have a number of folks, not only from the law department, but from other city departments as well, who are in our department throughout the day. They are assisting with our phone bank. We do put out a call for volunteers across the city to help man our phone banks. They help answer all the phone calls that come from every single precinct, and this election is a critical one. We do need to increase our volume of volunteers.
So that's the legal counsel that is in charge of that operation?
We do use a lot of folks from their team because we do fall under their cabinet, yes.
What is the role of the chief policy person on election night?
I'm not entirely sure. I know that they were looking at election results just like everyone else looks at the election results.
Savino?
I echo what the commissioner said.
What is it?
I echo what the commissioner said.
What was the answer, Savino?
The answer was, we don't know what his operation is. He was there looking at results like everyone else.
He was looking at what?
Results.
Printed results. So at the end of the night, once we close out a precinct from Central Tab, we are required to post the results from Central Tab just as we would at the precinct on election night. So for anyone who's run a campaign, you know that the poll workers print the results tape and they post it on the wall. We have to do the same thing for the ballots that are processed during central tabulation. We print those results, and those results are at our front counter for viewing by any member of the public.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Sabino, if you can, I've just gotten word that folks can almost hear you, so when you do speak, if you can speak into the microphone a little bit more.
Sure.
I appreciate that. We've been joined by Councilor Durkin, but we'll go to Councilor Braden and then Councilor Durkin for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it's good to see you both this morning. I apologise for my lateness. I had a conflict. So replacing the voting machines is about $2 million to accommodate, to be able to handle ranked choice voting. I'm curious, because we do municipal and federal and state elections, which those other federal and state elections are not necessarily ranked choice voting, do you need two separate types of machines, or will the one machine be able to do it all?
The one machine would do both.
Okay. And then in terms of preliminary turnout, in what circumstances would you be able to skip having a preliminary election? If there's a lot of candidates on the ballot, say 7 or 8, or and would that require? And if there was only 4, you could go straight to a general. You wouldn't need to have a preliminary, or how does that work? I'm just figuring out in terms of the ranked choice system?
I believe all of that is spelled out in the home rule petition, but my understanding of ranked choice voting is that in most municipalities who have adopted it, they don't have a preliminary at all. It's just the one election to rank the choices.
So, and that represents from your department, what sort of scale of savings would we make? You said it's about is it 1 million for a preliminary, 1 million for a general, or so you'd save about $1 million if you didn't have to do a preliminary?
Correct.
Okay. Also, just in terms of logistics, I apologise, my colleagues have probably asked a lot of these questions. In terms of logistics and training, I think one of the big challenges is just to make sure that our residents and our constituents are familiar with the process. This is, it's been used in other cities and other municipalities and other states, but do we have a sense of what sort of level of education we need to do in advance of switching to this system to make sure that our constituents are very familiar with, as familiar as possible with the process, and in terms of maybe bolstering your capacity to do that education? Any thoughts on that issue?
We would definitely have to sit down and devise a very strategic voter outreach campaign to ensure that every resident and voter is informed, as well as training our election day staff on the new method for voting, so that they can assist folks who may, for some reason, not receive whatever campaign we're advertising. If they miss it, there's still someone there on election day that can explain the process to the voter.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And I think that's really all I have for this morning. Thank you. Madam Chair, I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Councillor Burden. Councillor Durkin.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you so much to those who filed this. I think I've already been quoted about this particular issue. I definitely supported the initial ballot question that was more tied to state and federal elections, but for me, local elections, I didn't hear like a solid case made for why our local elections are flawed. And essentially, it's a very complicated process. I also have reverence for the history of Boston elections that have taken place, and I think that the City of Boston Elections Department and the City of Boston elections have been transparent, and they've had. I do find in my district, we're always trying to encourage more people to vote, and we're always trying to get more people at the table. We have some of the lowest voter percentages in the city. So I think from a position of wanting more people to get involved in voting and getting more people involved, I think this conversation is really important. I have a lot of questions about how this would work, and obviously if this home rule petition were to move to the state, at least on my end, based on talking to legislators, there's no evidence that they would move forward on this based on the conversations that I've had. So I don't know what I'm gonna do here. I feel that I'm someone who worked in elections before becoming a city councilor, so I take any changes to elections really seriously. So, Sabino, I know we have gotten the chance to work together over the years because I was the chair of my ward committee. Can you tell me what kind of burden this puts on the elections department and like what kind of resources you would need to implement this?
I think Commissioner's already touched on this in regards to resources needed. We need to see the whole implementation of the home rule petition before we can make those determinations of the actual costs and resources that are needed.
And I think our elections right now, I think there's definitely much to be desired in terms of getting people out to vote, getting people engaged. But I guess for me, And I'm excited to hear from the advocates and more folks that are advocating for this. And I've definitely heard from folks in my district that support this initiative. And I guess for me, the idea that people supported a ballot initiative that was about, at least for me, it was about state and federal elections and partisan elections. Obviously, we are, like the city council is nonpartisan. So I think, I guess I feel like I have a fully formed, at least a partially formed opinion on this issue. So, and I appreciate all of the work that you guys do day in, day out to increase participation. So I guess I don't have any questions for this panel, and I'll yield back for the next panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Durkin. I'm giving myself 6 minutes, and then I think we'll go to a second round. I've already been told by some of my colleagues that they have additional questions. We'll do that in order of arrival. I do have some follow-up questions, just given the breadth of your testimony, so thank you. Just some clarifying questions. You did say that so we've already put in new voting machines in 2019. And please correct me if I get any of this wrong. I just want to make sure I have a better understanding. And then that it could cost almost $2 million. And I know we shouldn't really be speaking in hypotheticals, so a lot of my questions will be about actual expenditures in the last couple of years, just to try to forecast out what this would take in terms of budgetary allocations. How much did the latest investment in 2019 cost? And would those be the machines that we replace even though they're only 5 years old?
Those machines were about $1.7 million to replace. And yes, they would be the ones replaced.
Would we see any of that money come back to the city of Boston in any way? Would we be able to sell them to other municipalities? Like, how does that work?
I think that may include a trade-in value. When we switched the AccuVote and went over to the precinct tabulator, there was some money that was allocated towards the new machines. And the same process, the same thing would happen here.
Okay.
Can I just add to that as well? These machines are no longer in production. They stopped production, the machines that we currently have, in 2022. So the useful life of them is going to come to an end within the next 5 to 7 years anyway. So that investment is probably going to have to be coming on the table real soon anyway.
And actually, I'm going to rephrase what I said. So whether or not there is any trade-in value for the machine is probably going to also be depend on the vendor. So we would have to actually put this out to bid, as there's more than one equipment vendor.
Who's our current vendor?
LHS Associates.
Vendor. All right. I do have a question about data security, but I'll wait for that. Can you just reiterate and restate the process as it relates to hand-counted ballots? You had mentioned if this were to be enacted, what that process might mean going from part-time commissioners to full-time. You had said it, but I just want to make sure I have my notes correct.
So right now, the way we handle hand count ballots is that they have to be recorded at the precinct. So if the voter, if a mail-in ballot, let's say, went to the precinct and there was a tear and for some reason the machine couldn't accept that ballot would have to be hand counted. And the poll worker would record the hand count ballots in our clerk's book. That process would have to change with ranked choice voting. We would have to figure out if there's special legislation or if the state would have to give us permission to actually keep those ballots separate, and everything would have to come back to us. And then we then establish a board or a body to actually, it's most likely the board, similar to a recount, would have to go through each individual ballot and remark a new ballot. So it's going to have to be an open public process. We're going to have to go through each ballot, re-record the vote on a clean ballot, so that ballot can then be fed through a machine.
Okay, so in order to administratively, in order to do this, basically, we would not only have to have the special legislation, but we would have to have another piece of legislation to give you permission to keep those ballots separate. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and then in addition to that, the city would also have to establish a board, potentially.
We do have a board. Right
But a
now,
separate board, I know we have an elections board.
we
but-
have an elections board. It could be a separate, it's typically the elections board, and I think that's how they do it in Cambridge as well. The elections board, which is made up of 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, would go through every single ballot. Right now, 2 of our board members are part-time members. So we would just have to relook at the structure of the board.
And will we need any special permissions to restructure it?
That would probably have to be internally, not from the state, no.
Okay, thank you. You did mention, Sabino, that a preliminary election, or you just said citywide election, feel free to correct me, is about $1 million. And you also mentioned police details. Folks are there for 12 plus hours a day. What does that police detail cost the city?
Don't know.
Okay. I'd like to make a formal request maybe to ask that so we get the right numbers on that. And then also the trainings. You all come here in these chambers and in other various spaces in the city to train poll workers and election workers who are very dedicated to the city, and I thank them because they are there 12 hours a day and they face a lot of things from the public. I'll just keep it at that. How much staff time does that take for you, for full-time staff, to train folks in the election? So not putting in terms of money, but I think like staff time.
Wow. They are usually working overtime anywhere from June through Election Day. We conduct over 45 trainings before every election to train 1,800 plus poll workers.
And do you foresee, if this were to be implemented, how would that training structure change, if it would at all?
It would definitely change. We've restructured training altogether since COVID. We do a lot more hands-on training for our chief election officers, and incorporate some online trainings for inspectors and folks who have a lot more experience. I think we would definitely want to bring everyone in for a hands-on training for that election, just so that they can test out the new voting equipment for themselves, because the best way to instruct voters is if you know how it works for yourself and not rely on an online presentation.
Thank you. I'll reserve my questions for the second round. I will be respectful of my colleagues' time and go back to the lead sponsors for any questions they have, and then to folks who have come in. Councilor Louis-Jean, you have the floor.
Thank you.
And I'll give 3 minutes. Thank you. Oh, I apologize, Councilor Worrell. Thank you for joining us. Would you like to ask any questions at this moment? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the sponsors for bringing this forward. Thank you for the panel to being here and the coalition that has been built to push ranked choice voting. I'm always for anything that's going to strengthen our democracy and increase voter engagement and voter turnout. A lot of my colleagues, I was listening in the back, have asked a lot of the questions that I've had around operation, the cost. But one thing that I'm a little curious about, and I'm not sure if you guys have thought about this yet, is education. What would a education initiative, just to let voters know, look like around the change into ranked choice voting?
Again, I think we would have to sit down and strategically plan for that. It would require, I would say, a variety of things and not just one form of education, not just one mailer. It could be a mailer, community meetings, instructional videos, just a variety of things to target voters and bring them up to speed.
Yes, and like I said, my colleagues have asked a lot of the questions I've already had, so I'll yield back my time and wait for the second panel. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Worrell. Okay, I'll go to Councilor Louis-Jean. You have the floor.
Thank you. I'm really eager to get to the next panel, and I know you all, I want to thank you again for being here. I know that the elections are coming. You said that you purchased this equipment in 2019. I think Councilor Mejia had asked that, and then she asked a really great question about and that discovered that we're going to have to get new machines anyway. But prior to 2019, when was the last purchase of machines?
2002, I believe.
Dad, that's not great.
Yeah,
Okay.
those machines definitely needed to be
Yeah,
replaced
definitely,
in 2019.
definitely. Okay, well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the work that you do. Elections are critically important to the vibrancy of our city, to our democracy. And Sabino, I think we all have a Sabino story. So we thank you for all that you do. And Commissioner, good luck with the upcoming election.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia.
I think you both have a very special place in my heart. I think you had just come on, right, Commissioner, when I won by 1 vote. And, I always talk about it being traumatic, and people think it's funny, but it was a real grueling process in terms of counting. And what we noticed, and even counting those ballots, just the voting patterns of the city voters was really interesting. I discovered that people who voted for Thea Garrison also voted for me, or people who, it was just like such an odd combination of folks in terms of like their choices. So I think I learned a lot in that process, and also understanding what democracy really looks like, because when I ran in 2019, during the primary, I was only 1,000 votes shy of earning one of the top 4 seats. And we were able to close that gap in the general election. And I remember it was incredible to hear that the first time that when the elections department, literally had all of the ballots, I got a call from then Mayor Walsh saying to me, hey, it looks like, you're gonna be the winner, because a lot of the precincts that you won in the primary haven't still come in, and you're already ahead like 200 votes, which made me feel like, oh yeah, I got this, right? And by the end of the night, I only really literally had won by 12 votes. And I claimed victory with just 12 votes. But I think it's important for me to share the story publicly, because I feel like in many ways I am the poster child for what the story is all about. And what we're trying to do here is because everyday people like me would never have a chance to be in this chamber right now fighting for more democracy. And I think that is right for me, why I signed on as a co-sponsor, because I think that story really resonates with a lot of folks who would never have the opportunity to be in this seat had it not been for you get to pick your top 4. And I am here today because of that, which is one of the reasons why I'm such a big champion of this work. And I also just want to note for the record that in 2021, when the ballot initiative was out, we noticed that Boston voters, out of all of the cities across the entire state, Boston had the highest turnout in support for ranked choice voting, which says to me, again, for us to really think about who our constituents are and what they want. They fought for, and we were one of the highest turnout. And I want to give a shout out publicly to Ron Bell, who worked on that coalition then in his leadership. And I know that we had a strong turnout in Boston for ranked choice then. And I think that speaks volumes to what the appetite should look like for us now. My question is about nonprofit organizations and the role that they play in supporting this. Because I think that oftentimes we think the burden is so heavy on the city, but I think in terms of being creative and thinking outside the box, what opportunities exist for us to partner with other nonprofit organizations who are doing this work to help us with the education piece. And I just want to also note that I think it's important for us to know that the ImageCast precinct machines are very capable of scanning ranked ballots and are used in ranked choice voting elections around the country. In fact, Cambridge uses the ImageCast precinct machines, and so do larger jurisdictions like San Francisco and every city in the Bay Area. So I just think it's important to note for the record that there are already demonstrated efforts that have been successful. So question about the nonprofit organizations and just your thoughts on the ImageCast that's used in other cities.
The ImageCast that we currently have could work for ranked choice voting. It would just slow down the processing time, which we've seen in a number of examples. It could essentially lead to a bottleneck for busier elections at the precinct. It would take 1 minute per ballot. What we would want to do is upgrade to a newer version of the ImageCast to slow it down, to speed it up and bring it down to about 15 seconds processing time rather than 1 minute per ballot. And then we do welcome the opportunity to collaborate with anyone who's interested in uplifting any messaging from our department. So we try to leverage now, as it speaks, whoever we can, whether it's members of our EAC, where we have mass vote and mass voter table as part of our election advisory council, to leverage them to assist with whether it's recruiting poll workers or just uplifting some of our messaging. We try to leverage other organizations as well. So we would definitely embrace that in this process.
Yeah, so this is
Thank
kind
you,
of like,
Councilor
oh,
Mejia.
well, my time is up.
Thank you. And just to be very clear, the city has a legal obligation to follow procurement laws with any purchase over $10,000. Councilor Santana?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm eager to hear from our next panel, so I don't have any other further questions for you all, but really appreciate you, Commissioner Sabino, for the work that you do. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Santana. Councilor Murphy?
I have no other questions. Thank you.
Okay. How about this? If anybody has any additional questions, why don't you put your light on? All right. Councilor Weber?
Thanks. Just one question. As Councilor Mejia just mentioned, and we saw in Cambridge, whenever they do a recount, there's always, there's some movement. Would you expect if we had ranked choice ballots that there would be more or less votes that are miscounted, no impact whatsoever?
We can't really speak to that at the moment. However, I will say that the details of a recount would definitely have to be something that is made clear for our department as well, and how someone would be able to file for a recount, and how we would conduct a recount as well. Because right now, someone can file and request a hand count or a count by machine. So that's something that we would have to determine. We haven't looked into it far enough to see how other municipalities manage it. If it's a hand count, if there still is an opportunity to hand count every ballot, or if they're able, if it's strictly a machine count.
Okay, yeah, but it's with the current machines or the new, if we got new machines, there's nothing about the ranked choice ballot that would lead to more miscounts. It sounds like that's what you're
I
saying.
don't think so.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Weber. Councilor Flynn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, thank you to the panel. Can you tell me, and I apologize, I missed this at the beginning, what cities or towns in Massachusetts have ranked voting?
East Hampton, which has 5 precincts, and Cambridge, which has about 39.
Okay. And if this were to be implemented in Boston, would it be for the city council and the even year elections, state reps, state senators? Or are we just starting with the city council?
This would be for municipal elections only.
Just municipal only? District council and at large, or does it not make a difference?
I believe that's what the home rule petition calls for.
Calls for both?
I believe so.
Okay. With, I don't know, maybe in my opinion, with at large, the field is narrowed down from whatever number it is to 8, I believe, right? And then the 8 would go into the final election. Isn't that basically somewhat ranked choice voting there, in a way?
I would say you're choosing from since you get 4 choices, you're choosing your top 4.
And what would the difference be for district city council? How would that logistically work?
Again, I don't want to miss anything that was in the home rule petition. Based on what I've read in the home rule petition, it would advance rather than the top 2 candidates, the top 4 candidates.
Oh, into November?
Into November, correct.
Okay. What would it do for the preliminary? Would it narrow it down? Would it narrow it down to a certain number of candidates?
So the prelim is the process for narrowing down.
Okay,
candidates.
yeah. Oh, then Then the final election, you would have 4, not 2?
Correct.
Okay. I don't know, maybe Sabino or Commissioner, but in district council races, probably for the most part over the last 20, 30 years, there's really been only a handful of candidates who run for district council. Sometimes you have 2 candidates, sometimes you have 3 candidates. Does that have any impact? I'm just thinking out loud on that.
Well, if you don't have enough candidates, the prelim wouldn't be necessary.
Oh, you wouldn't have a preliminary, you'd go right to the final.
Yep, similar to what we do now. So if there's not enough candidates to run in a district race, there would be no prelim for that district.
Okay, so you'd vote for at-large and the preliminary, and there would be nothing for district to vote for in the preliminary when you walk into the voting booth, basically. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Yes, okay, I do have just a few follow-up questions. I know that you have a hard stop at 12. You did have, oh, I apologize, Councilor Durkin. No, please. Sorry, I didn't see you.
Oh, no problem. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to continue along that line of questioning. So right now, like in the current scape, you would need to have 3 candidates at least for there to be a prelim. And this would make it so that there needed to be 5 candidates for there to be a prelim. So just in the past elections, have you seen a lot of district races that have 5 candidates?
Open races? I'm sorry. If there's no incumbent running, yes, we have seen some of those.
And so then in a race with 2 or 3 people, you would go in the November election, you would rank, even if there's only 2 candidates, you would rank 1 and 2.
Currently?
Yeah, or no, with ranked choice voting, you would rank 1, 2, 3 if there were 3 candidates. And I think for me that the issue is just like oftentimes when you get to the very end of an election, you don't want to vote for the other person in any way. They're not your second choice. They're not your third choice. Like you have one choice because you've been part of part of that campaign. You may not, I guess I just am following along with Councilor Flynn's questioning that I feel like this is kind of creating it's creating like almost like a false choice of like 1, 2, 3, where 2 and 3 may not be your choice.
I would say, Sabina, rather than you reading through that and trying that, I would, all of that is identified in the home rule petition, so I don't want to try and kind of explain what the intention of the home rule petition was, but all of that is detailed in the home rule petition.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Durkin. I have a couple more questions. You said you usually send out a mailer. How much does that mailer cost?
The mailer, how much did the mailer cost us this last time?
The early voting mailer?
Yeah.
It's about $30,000 to print and $120,000 for postage, about $150,000.
Was it? Oh, it's about $120,000, $130,000.
To how many households?
213,000.
213,000.
213,000. Okay.
We have over 400,000 registered voters.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Do you foresee any? Actually, no, this question was already asked. Sorry. I won't even go there. Let's see. How many people are currently work in the elections department year-round, and how much is employed during election season? And I guess what's that cost breakdown?
I'll let you speak to cost.
I believe there's 32 full-time employees, and obviously during peak times of the year, which is elections, we do increase our staff with part-time staff, as well as bringing in poll workers to help and assist with processing the vote-by-mail ballots. I believe right now, because of the workload, there's at least 20 part-time staff in there and poll workers.
20 part-time staff, okay. And it's already been discussed about what the increase to staffing may be if this were to go through. So that's helpful to understand what that increase might be. Do you have, I don't know if you have it in front of you, but what that cost breakdown is? Can we follow up with you on that? Okay, great. I'll ask on behalf of the committee. And then this is my last question, and then we can go to public testimony. Just in terms of data security, I mean, we see attacks on democracy more frequently these days. My understanding is that we've talked a lot about voting machines, and I've learned so much, so thank you. How vulnerable are we to these potential attacks? I know that we have new voting machines. And what additional improvements would be necessary to ensure this integrity of this process? Is there anything that would change that we should know about? And the answer can also be no.
There is nothing that would change.
Okay.
I just want to add, our machines are not online, so that everything is offline. So they are not connected to any web or anything like that.
Okay, so they are safeguarded, so to speak,
Yep.
against any sort of cyber
You
security
need to get
attacks.
into the machine to get access to the machine.
Excellent. Well, that's really good to know, and that makes me feel really great. That's it for my questions. Just looking around. Oh, we have Councilor Murphy.
Thank you. I have a question. Do we print in-house?
No, we do not print in-house.
Okay. And to follow up what Councilor Durkin was saying, as an at-large councilor, I'm well aware of the 4 votes. And as it stands now, you have 4 votes. You can use none. You can vote for 1, 2, 3, or 4, and there's no penalty. If you vote for more than 4, obviously the ballot is not proper. But when it comes to district, would you have to? Like, would you be penalized? Are you forced to use more than 1 vote? Could you still just use 1 in a ranked choice voting, or would the ballot instructions read differently?
Again, I believe that's what it states in the home rule petition. You could just use 1.
And would this include mayoral races also, not just the city council, correct?
Yes,
So you still can just use 1 and not be penalized?
that's correct.
Okay, so you still could, yep, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy. Okay, that concludes our questioning of the administration panel. Thank you so much again. This is a busy time. I will respectfully ask that one of you stay to listen and appreciate your time.
We can stay till 12. Well, unfortunately, we both have an off-site meeting that we have to send to.
Okay. All right. Can you commit to reviewing the entirety of the hearing?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Thank you. Well, because we'll test you on it. I'm just kidding. Thank you for being here.
Of course.
I appreciate it. Okay, we're now going to transition to public testimony. You folks are dismissed, I guess.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Also, if you have public testimony sign-in sheet 2 and 3, please return it because we need it. We need to make sure that we have these names. I am going to go to this first page of public testimony. We have 4 people on Zoom. We have a number of people signed up, so please keep it to 2 minutes. We'll start with Zachary, and I apologize for saying your name wrong. Zachary Kennard, Jerron Chang, Malaysia Fuller Staten, Mary Sten Clanton, Lou Fendler. We'll start there. Okay? You have 2 minutes. Please be sure to state your name, neighborhood, and organization or any associated affiliation. So we have Zachary and Jerome. Okay, we'll come back to him. Jerome? Do we have Malaysia?
Hi, I'm Malaysia Fuller Staten. I'm a Roxbury resident. Yeah, so I'm here in support of the home rule petition for ranked choice voting. I didn't prepare anything to speak, so I'm going to speak off the top of my head. I think the first thing I want to say from sitting and watching this hearing was that it seems to me like I think this hearing proves that there's a lot of discussion that needs to be had for clarity about ranked choice voting. I think folks are not fully clear what it would mean and what it would look like, which is understandable because we haven't heard from the coalition panel yet and it hasn't been implemented yet. But I think to clarify something that I heard that kind of concerned me about like the understanding is that when the part of the reason that we want this to be implemented is because we believe that it will encourage more people to run for office. So the concerns about if there aren't a lot of people on the ballot, that's one of the things that we're trying to alleviate by supporting ranked choice voting. I think the other thing is that like no one can force you to vote no matter what. So like no one can, if there's 17 candidates on the ballot and you want to vote for one or you want to vote for two, like they can't stop you from only voting for one or two. And I think that this like, from my understanding, when I talk to people, like I'm just a regular person. I don't, I'm not paid to do this. I'm a concerned community member. And when I talk to people, they seem to have a pretty clear understanding of choosing the people, putting the people they like in order. Like, you like this person best, you maybe like this person a little less, so you put them 2 or 3 or whatever. I think that I would say it seems like there's a lot more confusion in this room than I've heard in any other room with average voters. So that's my testimony. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have Zach or Jerome with us? Jerron?
It's Jared.
Zach. Jaron, and I apologize for saying your name wrong. I'm so sorry. Zach, you're up first for 2 minutes.
Sorry, I thought there was another panel first. Hello, everyone. Hi. My name is Zachary Kinnaird. I have been an election warden for a little bit, and prior to that, I was an election judge. I've worked as a poll worker in 20 different election days. I am a big supporter of this bill. One thing I wanted to mention, sorry I'm out of breath, I didn't know it was right now, was that there was a recent study. I know there's a lot of concern, and I think rightly so, about like, are we going to get more people involved? Are we going to get increased turnout? There was an academic study released in August this year of 2024, analyzing 60 different jurisdictions across the country from 2019 till now. It showed an average increase of voter turnout of 17% in all those jurisdictions. So anyway, that was my first thing. I forgot my second thing. How much time do I got? 1 minute? Cool. I think I'll just stop there. That's fine, but thank you all so much. And it's an honor to be a poll worker for the city. So thank you so much.
Thank you. You're welcome. After everybody's testimony, to add to anything that you wanted to say. All right, we have Jaron.
Thank you, Counselor. I'm Jaron. I'm a Dorchester resident in Counselor Fitzgerald's district, actually. A mentor once told me that elections at their best are an exercise in civic and political education, an opportunity for candidates and community to come together and learn from one another as they set our course for the next 2 to 4 years. And when I first heard this, to be honest, it felt a little foreign to me. It's not my experience with elections, and I imagine it's not many of ours. As a voter, I've often felt like I didn't have a meaningful choice or a candidate that reflected my values or my aspiration for my community. As a campaign volunteer, including to many of you here today, I know the structure of our elections create political pressure that often force candidates to focus on the negative or to create false distinctions as opposed to lifting each other up and focusing on where we find common ground. As a co-founder of Gen Unity, a Boston civic leadership nonprofit committed to healing our civic culture with nearly 300 members across neighborhoods, race, class, I know I'm not alone in feeling this way. This petition is a step towards elections that live up to our ideals. By allowing 4 candidates to advance the general election, voters will have more choices. By ranking our preferences, voters will ensure that their vote isn't wasted if their first candidate or first choice doesn't win. Both changes will help candidates to focus on where they have common ground and engage and appeal to all voters. This is an essential step to make our elections a communal process where we come together, listen deeply to each other, and build constructively towards a better Boston for everyone. I applaud this committee and the co-sponsors for advancing this measure, and I hope that the full council does the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Mary Sten Clanton, Lou Findler, and then Martha Carcere.
Hello. Where's the microphone? Oh, there it is. Hi. My name is Mary Sten Clanton, nickname Masha. I am a Dorchester resident, and I'm here to support the ranked choice voting measure. The reason that I really became passionate about this issue is that I've, as a voter in many elections, not so much the Boston ones, but in the national and even state elections, I've noticed that sometimes candidates are really discouraged from running because they will be spoilers. And so we're actually having anti-democratic democracy because people are being told that, you know, you can't run because you will just throw the election to another candidate that we don't want. So basically then very few people end up in control of the election. And so I'm really passionate about ranked choice voting because I want everyone who thinks they have something to bring to the job to be able to run and not be discouraged. And for me and other voters who sometimes vote for long shot candidates, not to have to feel that we're wasting our votes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Next up, we have Lou Finfer, and then Martha and Annie.
Thank you very much for hearing me. I'm Lou Finfer. I'm from Dorchester, and I'm with an organization called Massachusetts Action for Justice. I appreciate the questions that each of the counselors were asking today, that you're really delving into this, because it's a very important issue, and I appreciated the thoughtfulness in the different questions counselors asked about the proposal. It's hard for me not to digress a bit. I'm remembering the first time I ever testified at a Boston City Council hearing was in 1972. So it was a long time ago, and there's been many trips here since then. But we're on ranked choice of voting. I think it can lead to more diverse candidates based on race and class running for office if you have this kind of a system. And that's a plus. I think it can make it more interesting to voters because it's just voters will be thinking about their first choice and their second choice. I think it's going to be more challenging for candidates, but in a good way, that they'll have to think about people they talk to, that I might not be their first choice, but could I be their second choice? And I think that's just going to encourage even reaching harder to listen to and connect to people on the part of the candidate. And also on the part of the voters, because they're going to have to think about that, not just, I know I want to vote for this person. They're going to have to think about that and listen more about where the other candidates stand, that they might have a chance their vote might end up going to that person as their second choice. I think that's all for the good. There's also the question that you've heard about the spoiler effect and how that could influence in the outcomes of certain elections. And with ranked choice voting, it's less likely for that kind of outcome to come. So those are some points, and I appreciate your looking at this. I know it's a big change for the city. Obviously, you'll probably look at some of the other localities in the country that have this. Cambridge has their own version. I know it's a proportional representation. It's even goes further than this in certain kinds of ways, but I'm sure you'll look at other cities and communities that have this in the country as part of your evaluation. Thanks for letting me speak, and thanks to you today.
Thank you. Okay, we have Martha from Jamaica Plain Progressives, Annie from New Bay, and then we'll go to Bill King, if you all want to queue up.
Good morning, respected City Council members. My name is Martha Carcher, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Jamaica Plain Progressives. We're a group with 100 active members. We have a mailing list of around 3,000, and we endorsed ranked choice voting 8 years ago. We have a recent example of why, again, we think ranked choice voting is so important. In 2023, there was a special State House representative election in the 10th Suffolk, and Representative Coppinger had resigned his seat, and there were 3 candidates who launched campaigns. 2 provided almost identical answers on the Progressive Mass questionnaire. A third did not do the questionnaire, and he was supported by police and firefighter officer unions, did not agree with rent control, was widely perceived on being more conservative. We were not surprised when the results of this election was that the 2 progressive candidates received respectively 31.5% and 24.2% of the vote, obviously added together greater than 50% of the votes, but the more conservative candidate won with 44.3% of the vote. So this election for us, and we're sharing this with you, demonstrates the weakness of our current system. Here, a community with shared values is penalized when there are multiple candidates running. They split the vote, and a candidate with less than 50% of the vote can win. This does not happen with ranked choice voting. While our values are progressive, the points from this example apply equally well to more conservative constituencies, where a libertarian candidate can pull votes from a conservative candidate, bringing about a splitting of the conservative vote. Ranked choice voting ensures that a majority of voters support the winning candidate. It eliminates splitting, it decreases negative campaigning, as candidates strive to win the second and third choice votes. And so we strongly urge that the City Council vote to endorse the home rule petition for ranked choice voting. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Next up, we have Annie, East Boston resident and executive director, I think, of New Bay. I do just want to say Annie's going to give her testimony in Spanish, although I neglected to draw my colleagues' attention to the folder that's in their inboxes sent by Megan Kavanaugh that includes all of the public testimony that we've gotten so far, which includes Annie's testimony, I believe, in English. So Annie, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Mi nombre es Enilda Lobo, soy la directora ejecutiva de Nube, Vecinos Unidos por un Mejor East Boston, Neighbor United for a Better East Boston. Gracias por darme la oportunidad de testificar en mi idioma nativo, que es el español. Nube es una organización cívica que mueve muchos votantes alrededor de East Boston y otras ciudades cada año a nivel electoral. Nosotros estamos apoyando el Ranking Choice Voting porque consideramos que es un proceso democrático donde permitiría tener representación auténtica de nuestras comunidades. Queremos expresar nuestro firme apoyo como organización para el Top 4 Ranking Choice Voting en las elecciones municipales de Boston. Como defensores de la transformación social y el empoderamiento de la comunidad, creemos que esta reforma electoral es esencial para amplificar las voces de nuestros residentes latinos y avanzar en la equidad de nuestra ciudad. El voto por orden de preferencia permitiría a los votantes expresar sus preferencias a múltiples candidatos, asegurando que las voces de los residentes latinos en East Boston y en otras ciudades sean escuchadas en los procesos de toma de decisiones. Esta amplificación es vital para nuestra comunidad, permitiendo que nuestras necesidades y preocupaciones tomen el centro del escenario en el gobierno local, lo que lleva a políticas más inclusivas que reflejan a nuestra población diversa. La aplicación de Ranking Choice Voting puede fortalecer las coaliciones entre diversos grupos comunitarios que abogan por la justicia social. Nube cree que la transformación social se produce cuando se capacita a líderes locales para crear el cambio. La votación del voto universal apoya esta filosofía, permitiendo que las comunidades pueden elegir representantes que rindan cuentas directamente. Nube apoya firmemente la implementación de la votación por orden de preferencia Top 4 como una herramienta esencial para lograr la transformación social y promover la equidad en nuestra ciudad, mediante la ampliación de las voces latinas, el fomento de la representación diversa, el fomento del compromiso cívico, la creación de coaliciones y el apoyo de soluciones dirigidas por la comunidad. Instamos al Consejo de la Ciudad a apoyar esta reforma electoral como un paso crítico hacia la creación de un futuro justo, próspero para todos los residentes de East Boston. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Annie. Next up, we have Bill King and Josh Daniels.
Hi, I'm Bill King of Brighton. I'm writing in support of this. I've been a volunteer with Voter Choice Massachusetts, Rank Choice Boston, and Rank the Vote. Been canvassing in person, making phone calls, and contributing to this cause to improve our democratic government since 2017. I have found that most voters approve of being able to express more of their opinions, especially after they're shown a sample ballot with columns for their second and third choices. Ranked choice voting will vastly reduce the chance of spoiler candidates splitting the vote of the majority. Currently, a three-way race can be won by only 34%. There have been and are spoiler candidates supported by opposition. This is not the way it should be. Conventions use multiple rounds of voting until a majority decision is reached. In fact, the U.S. Constitution requires the Electoral College to determine the winner by a majority of over 50%. Now, with the City Council at large multi-winner elections, ranked choice voting will be an even bigger help. We now vote for up to 4 candidates. But some of us vote for less than 4 candidates, a bullet vote, to not hurt the chances of our first choice candidate. This bill resolves the problem by allowing us to rank in order of preference, and is a big step forward for more choice and majority rule with minority voices still represented, with true proportional representation of the citizens of Boston. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Josh Daniels, Stephen Pina, and then Maureen White.
Thank you. Thank you. My name's Josh Daniels. I'm going to be on the advocate panel, so I'll defer my remarks to then if that's okay. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you. Stephen Pina, and then Maureen White. And
Stephen Pina had an appointment. He had to step out, so he won't be testifying today.
Maureen, you're up. Good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Hello, thanks for having this hearing. I'm Maureen White. I'm an East Boston resident. I'm actually not here as part of any coalition or organization. I'm here as an individual citizen who feels so passionately about this issue. I took the morning off to sit through this hearing. I really think in a democracy, our process for how we make decisions is equally as important as what decisions we make. And I think that when you give people a better process, they make better decisions. Frankly, the idea that in one of the largest democracies in the entire world, We have to consider voting for someone who is not our first choice because they might spoil the election or split the vote is ridiculous. The fact that I have to do mental gymnastics before voting to think, well, I'd like to vote for this candidate, but she's a woman. Just how sexist is the rest of the electorate? Should I vote for someone else so I don't throw away my vote so that I don't end up with my least favorite candidate? That is absurd, to be frank. We can do better, we should do better. And to be honest, ranked choice voting is actually quite intuitive to voters. It is really no different than if my brother's going to the store, he says, you want me to grab you a drink? I say, yeah, I'd like a Coke. If they don't have Coke, grab me a Pepsi. If they're out of both of those, I'll settle for a root beer. But I don't want a Sprite or a 7-Up, right? I volunteered at a polling place during the ballot initiative in 2020. Voters understand this. It took 30 seconds to explain it to them when they were going into the polls, and every single person I talked to said, that sounds like a no-brainer, I'm gonna vote for that. I think that if COVID hadn't interrupted education efforts around that ballot initiative, it probably would have passed. So please consider voting for this. We need to do better, and to be perfectly honest, I can't imagine why you wouldn't support it unless you were worried that a better system would vote you out of office. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Next up, we have Afia. I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, from Brighton.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
My name is Afia Feuerstein. I am also not coming here as part of, well, I am part of Ranked Choice Boston, but I'm not part of another organization today. I'm coming here as a citizen as well, and I'm here to represent myself and to represent my family, the Feuerstein family. I have been an activist for ranked choice voting my entire adult life. To give you an idea, it has been extremely important to me pretty much since I was able to vote. The reason why it's so important is because when we think about democracy, we're thinking about getting the majority, the voice of the people as they are, a diverse set of people from many races, from many classes, to have their voice be heard. And I can't think of a better system for that than ranked choice voting. That's why I'm here today, and that's why I've been fighting for this for pretty much ever. I wanted to speak just briefly on myself and my background. My grandfather is Aaron Feuerstein of Malden Mills. He's famous for paying off his workers when his factory burned down. Many people know that story, but something that was instilled in me from a very young age is the idea that we have to listen to people. We have to listen to people from every single economic class, whoever they might be. My grandfather, when he used to be the CEO of Malden Mills, he would have an open door policy with his office. Everyone would come in, talk to them about whatever they wanted. If they had an idea, didn't matter who they were, they could voice that opinion to him. And that created a work environment that people loved at that company. And that is something that was instilled very deeply in me from a young age, and it's a big reason why I'm here today. This idea of hearing everyone out, understanding what the majority actually wants and not allowing vote splitting to deter the majority of people from having their voice be heard is so critically important. That is why I'm currently here, and I want to thank you all for listening to me. I please urge you to vote for this.
Thank you, everybody, for your testimony. If you still want to speak, you have the opportunity to at the end of this hearing. I understand we do have some folks online. We are now, in the interest of time, going to move to the second panel. So I will invite the following individuals down. Please take a seat behind one of these 4 chairs. If we need to get more chairs, we will. I think we'll have to. Ed Shoemaker, who's the Executive Director of Ranked Choice Voting Boston. Marisola Santiago from Mass Vote. Rasan Hall from the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts. Josh Daniels from Fair Vote, who is the legal advisor. Victoria Pelletier, who is a city councilwoman from Portland, and Greg Dennis, who is the policy director of Voter Choice Massachusetts. Thank you. Okay. Thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate your time and your advocacy. We'll first go to Ed Shoemaker, and then leave it to your discretion on who wants to speak afterwards. Ed, please feel free to provide your remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Council. My name is Ed Shoemaker. I am the Executive Director of Ranked Choice Boston. Today, I'm here before you to express our enthusiasm for supporting the implementation of top 4 ranked choice voting in Boston's municipal elections. RCV is an invigorating, fresh breath air our democracy desperately needs. Boston has always been boldly committed to progress and democracy. We have made great strides in the last decade to elect a record diverse and inclusive representation. We must ensure that these advances are permanent for administrations to come. If new leadership took over that didn't value equity and fairness, this vital progress would be under threat. Over the past several months, we've rolled up our sleeves, worked tirelessly to assemble a dynamic coalition. We've brought together advocates, community members, and a whole lot of passionate individuals who are ready to bring about this change. Our coalition includes over 50 organizations, all sharing the belief that our electoral system should reflect the vibrant tapestry of our communities. From the get-go, we recognize that change doesn't happen in a vacuum. It takes teamwork. We've partnered with an array of organizations, including grassroots groups and local civic leaders, united by the common goal of making our elections more inclusive. This coalition is like the Avengers of democracy, and trust me, we're ready to assemble. We've hosted 50 community forums where residents could share their thoughts about the electoral process. Just picture it, engaged citizens, coffee in hand, discussing how to make voting less of a headache and more of a celebration. The feedback we received has been invaluable, helping us to tailor our advocacy to ensure it resonates with our diverse neighborhoods. Recognizing that grassroots support is a secret sauce to any successful campaign, we've rallied our members to hit the streets, literally. From door-to-door canvassing to enthusiastic social media campaigns, our coalition has been all about mobilizing the masses. The enthusiasm has been contagious, and it's clear Boston residents are ready for this change. We've made it a point to engage with elected officials to advocate for RCV. We've presented them with compelling data and real-life stories demonstrating the positive impacts of RCV in other jurisdictions. It's been a journey, and we've had some great conversations about this reform, how this reform can elevate representation and civic participation here in Boston. At the heart of our coalition's mission is a commitment to equity and inclusion. RCV isn't just a new fancy term, it's a game changer that levels the playing field, allowing more diverse candidates to run for office. It's time to dismantle the barriers that keep underrepresented voices on the sideline, and RCV is the first step in that direction. The coalition we've built is just the beginning of what we hope will be a long, fruitful journey. Together we envision a Boston where our electoral system truly reflects our vibrant tapestry and our diverse communities. RCV isn't just a reform, it's a vision for the future of our democracy. In conclusion, let's not beat around the bush. I urge you, the Boston City Council, to support the implementation of top 4 ranked choice voting. This is our chance to enhance our electoral process, empower communities, and inject some much needed life into our democracy. With the coalition we've built and the enthusiasm we've generated, we can make Boston a beacon of equitable governance and representation. To summarize, with RCV, we lock in the incredible progress Boston has made on representation, more choice for a larger and very diverse voter turnout in general elections. RCV is proven to increase voter turnout in odd-year elections and will lead to more constructive political conversations. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ed, and thank you for all your work on making today a reality. I'm not sure who would like to go next. Awesome.
Thank you so much. Hello, members of the Boston City Council. Nice to see you. My name is Victoria Pelletier, and I am the National Partnerships Manager at Represent Women, which is a research organization that supports solutions to address the barriers that women face in politics. I am also in public office as the second Black woman elected to the Portland, Maine City Council. And I made the long and exhausting trek all the way from Portland, Maine here to Boston. It was only an hour and a half, I'm just kidding, to express my support for ranked choice voting. And my colleagues at Represent Women actually sent a lot of you written testimony with our research and our data. So we're happy to do a deeper dive on that with each of you at any time with our research team. But just to give you some numbers on how ranked choice voting does impact and affect women holding public office, women hold 53% of city council seats in jurisdictions with ranked choice voting, and 12 out of the 32 mayoral seats have been elected with ranked choice voting. And currently 55% of the Cambridge City Council seats are held by women. Janet Mills, Maine's first woman governor, was elected through ranked choice voting. In the council that I'm currently serving on, we are women-led for the very first time and the most racially diverse that we have ever been. And again, that's in Portland, Maine. And I've heard a lot of the conversation, and I really appreciate.
That's not for you.
I really appreciate the questions, and I think I just want to keep it real in this space. Just one elected official to another. RCV is better for the community that you serve, and it is better for democracy. Voters who were once apathetic or unengaged now feel like they have a voice at the polls because they can actually rank their candidates by preference. So they're no longer stuck choosing one option from limited candidates who may not represent their best interests. And I did hear some concerns as well that voters won't understand ranked choice voting, which I do think is a valid concern. It's new, it's different, I understand that. But I do disagree with that. Our constituencies are very intelligent and knowledge is power. And it's on us as elected officials to foster that voter empowerment. So I actually don't think that there's a correlation between ranked choice voting and people not understanding it. But I do think that there's a correlation between the lack of intentional outreach from government to the people, whether RCV exists or not. And I can say that as a Black woman that ran on a platform about accessibility with government because I felt like the government was not doing enough to hear and support people that looked like me. So the existence of ranked choice voting narrows the gap between people and government by allowing voters freedom of choice. And we practice a lot in Maine as well. It comes up every year at election time. What's going on with ranked choice voting? I need a refresher. We do holiday-themed sample ballots. We have had it for years, and we still make sure that everybody feels prepared when they go to the ballot box. So this is not a one-time conversation. We have ranked choice voting. Let's never talk about it again. We do talk about it every election and make sure that our constituencies feel confident when they're going to the ballot. And I will say as well, the existence of ranked choice voting doesn't mean that I'm now getting every result that I want. There are times that my first choice did not win the election. There are times that my second choice did not win the election. And I was disappointed, but as disappointing as it was, I found comfort in the fact that whoever won got the majority of the votes, and it was truly reflective of the will of the voters. I know that votes weren't wasted. I know that votes weren't split. And as a policymaker and a community member, knowing that your vote really counts and being able to say that to your constituency is the most important priority. So I'll just close with saying on behalf of Represent Women and also myself as an elected official, we are glad to support ranked choice voting in Boston. We're happy to present our research to you at any time. If you should do a task force, we're happy to have that conversation. And I'm happy to give you my perspective as an elected official in a city, in a state with ranked choice voting, how that works with my constituents. And I encourage you to move forward in the spirit of a better and more inclusive democracy for all. Thank you.
Councilwoman, we're really excited to have you here. Happy to see the city-to-city partnership.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam President, to the members of this committee and the council. My name is Rasan Hall. I'm the president and CEO, thank you, of the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts. I'm also the co-chair of the Ranked Choice Boston Coalition. Wait your turn. I'm sure there are several of you who have heard that when thinking about running for office. Wait your turn. Because if you go now, you're going to distract from the candidate that has the best choice of winning. Wait your turn because if you go now, you're not going to get enough votes because people don't know who you are. Wait your turn. Ranked choice voting does away with that, because it's inappropriate and it's unnecessary. I don't know that anything that I'll say today is going to bring much illumination beyond what anyone else has said from either panel or from the residents of the city of Boston who have testified. But what I will add my voice to is the perspective of someone who has been involved in civil rights law, and particularly voting rights law, from my time at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, being involved in election protection initiatives, being involved in the redistricting of the state of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that led to the creation of a district that saw its first black woman ever elected to Congress, involved in the redistricting in the city of Boston 12 years ago, involved in lawsuits that challenged the registration deadline of the state, lawsuits that held state agencies to its responsibilities to do more voter registration of poor people or people who are on public benefits. As someone who has been engaged in ensuring that access to the electoral process has always been expanded and never decreased. The data is clear that ranked choice voting increases participation from individuals who would otherwise not consider running for office but have very good and valuable platforms and ideas to bring to the public. The data is clear that ranked choice voting increases voter participation, particularly from segments of the population who have been otherwise unengaged and uninterested because they don't see candidates that either look like them or represent their ideas and their values. The data is clear that a significant majority of the residents of the city of Boston are in favor of ranked choice voting. Now, there have been several questions that were raised earlier as to whether or not it was confusing. It's not. And we don't have to elevate the intellect of our residents. There are a lot of intelligent people in the city of Boston, but there are some people who aren't the sharpest tool in the box, and they can still figure out ranked choice voting. We've had several community events where we have gone into community with a wide array of people from different educational backgrounds, different linguistic backgrounds, different levels of employment, and we've done samples of ranked choice voting. In Roxbury, we've done it with patties, Jamaican patties. You want a beef patty, you want a chicken patty. We've gone to East Boston and we've done it with empanadas, beef, chicken, veggie, shrimp. The people understood how to rank your choice. There weren't questions. There weren't concerns about whether or not I get penalized for not voting for a particular flavor of empanada. People understand it clearly. And what was also clear is that the overwhelming majority went or was in support of the one that won. Or not the overwhelming majority, but it was clear that what won had the support of the people in the room. And so I think it is important that we understand that in an effort to increase voter participation, to increase civic engagement, and to change the tenor and tone of our politics, we have to implement this. If a candidate is trying to get the second or third choice vote of a voter, that rhetoric directed at someone who would otherwise be considered their opponent will likely be tuned down. They're not going to do the things that would otherwise alienate people. Lastly, I'll just reiterate this notion of electability, particularly as it relates to women and people of color. We should not have a system that disfavors people participating because they're not electable, because they're not the people who would otherwise get the votes. And so people don't have to consider splitting their vote, wasting their vote, throwing away their vote. Let's not tell people to wait their turn.
Thank you, Rasan. Josh.
Great, thank you. Thanks for having me. My name is Josh Daniels. I am from Utah, where I served as the elected county clerk in the second largest county. Our county, Utah County, was the first to implement and administer ranked choice elections for cities that would choose to use ranked choice elections. And we began that process in 2019, repeated it in 2021, and then 2023. But I have the distinct honor personally of having cast my first adult vote here in Boston. When I was in the Marine Corps, I lived for a time in Hyde Park and cast the first ballot in a voting booth as an adult in the 18th Ward. So it's a real honor to be back here discussing the election systems in Boston. I'd just like to talk about two main things, some considerations for administering elections and then considerations for voters specifically. The largest city in Utah, Salt Lake City, used ranked choice elections, and they used the exact same vendor system that you use here in Boston, the Dominion voting system, and has been mentioned previously. A lot of other similar cities like Santa Fe, New Mexico, and some of those in the Bay Area of California use the same vendor system that you use. And you know, had a successful administrative experience in utilizing ranked choice elections with that system. Some interesting things to think about with the administration of elections that's been brought up are the timing of results. In our experience, the timing of results were no different than any other results. It's really an administrative decision of when you produce your export and when you choose to report results. Of course, results are never final till they're actually final, and they're always unofficial and preliminary on election night. And that's no different with ranked choice voting, even though there's that process of determining how the ranking leads to those that are the winners or those that are ahead. But in our experience, we reported those preliminary ranked results on election night and subsequent to that for other interim reporting of results. We used the same systems, processes, audit procedures as we did for any other type of balloting when we did ranked choice. The ballot design, you know, took a few more steps because that's slightly different, but it wasn't a significant administrative burden in our experience. But then what we did was spend a lot of time on voter engagement. And one of the interesting experiments we did was we took ranked choice ballots to an assisted living center and we handed them out and we gave 0 instructions about ranked choice voting and 0 education. And we simply said, hey, here's some ballots that we're testing. Go ahead and fill these out. And then we just walked around and tried to listen and discern what concerns, if any, would pop up. And what we found was that just the ballot itself is intuitive by design, and that voters had an intuitive experience with the idea of selecting rankings. And there was no discernible problem or error rate that came with that population. And so we felt like, you know, as we would share ranked choice ballots in similar fashion with other types of groups and constituencies, the same thing was repeated, which was it's intuitive and easy to understand. We also did some exit polling of voters that had participated in ranked choice elections, and over 80% reported that they liked it, that they found it easy to use, and that they wanted to continue using it. And that's been repeated in jurisdictions around the country. When voters experience ranked choice balloting, they like it. A majority always reports that they favor it, that they want to continue it, and that sort of thing. Now let me dwell on one really important feature, and that is the reduction in bullet voting. So there's a strategic advantage for voters to not use all of their votes in a block plurality system like you use in your at-large elections. We had similar at-large elections in Utah with multiple winners, and we actually looked at the year-over-year difference in the number of bullet or blank or undervotes and the instances of that. So I know that if you look at your recent 2023 municipal election for the at-large seats, your blank votes or undervotes or bullet votes, if you will, was almost 30%. What we found was that year over year for 2 different cities that we studied, the decrease in bullet voting under ranked choice voting from the plurality block system was 4.5 times. So like 450% reduction in those instances of voters disenfranchising themselves because of the sort of natural strategic advantage that I think is a systemic defect in a block plurality election, which is commonly used for these at-large seats in Utah as well. So I think considering that type of a point for voter experience, there's a lot to be gained by using ranked balloting. So, and if you have questions about administrative, I'd love to answer those. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Marisol.
Yes, thank you all for taking the time to bring this forward, and thank you, Council President. for making this opportunity possible as well, and all the co-sponsors. I'm the Policy and Organizing Director with Mass Vote. Cheryl Clyburn Crawford is our Executive Director and the Co-Chair of Ranked Choice Boston as well, and a member of the Boston Election Commission, as stated earlier. And we work in partnership as statewide coordinators with also our Executive Director, Shanique Spalding, who is also on the Election Commission as well. And our goal through the Democracy Hubs is essentially 50 civic engagement organizations that do nonpartisan year-round education through issue advocacy and also with voting and civic participation. We've talked a lot about education here today, and I think that's really great to hear the agreement that, like, you know, this is something important in our electoral process and a priority for all of us that have been involved in this coalition. And with people that have been part of this coalition and spearheading these efforts, I think it's clear that, you know, again, just to reiterate that this type of voting system is actually quite friendly to communities, and in particular where Mass Vote focuses in disenfranchised, historically marginalized communities. We've done, you know, that work of sitting and really realizing, like, wow, this is a lot more simple than people often talk about. And as being part of the Rank the Empanadas, you know, another example is just like if we talk about even sports, you know, like in our country, as a, you know, big baseball and basketball fan myself, like we're always talking about who's going to win the Western Conference and who's going to clinch the East. Like, you know, here's our top 3, here's our top 4, right? So it feels very intuitive in that way, and I think that the community by far and large has expressed that, which has been amazing. The other thing that we're really like excited about is the data. The data is amazing. Where this policy is in place, it's showing that it's doing exactly what we wanted it to do, right? And so that's also like a big plus for Boston at the hour of implementation, that we could say that we actually have data that shows that this is working. This is not something that's essentially completely new. On the terms of change and changing electoral systems, I do agree, as Councilor Mejia said earlier, that, you know, we need to be thinking forward. We're in 2024. We have the technology. We actually have a ton of people power and expertise, you know, in the city of Boston and also in this room in terms of partnerships and people that have been dedicated, as Rasan has stated, you know, to making sure that electoral processes are inclusive, that we're uplifting civil rights, that we're making sure that every single person feels access to a ballot, right, can be actually in the booth confidently exercising that right that many people have fought hard for our communities to actually exercise. And so I think it's simple for Mass Vote. We're deeply committed to this work. We're deeply committed to being in partnership with the coalition and the city of Boston in terms of making sure that our education, our engagement work continues strong. And yeah, that we can look forward to advancing something that's better, something that's showing that it's actually bringing more people to the table, which is another big goal for Mass Vote, right? It's seeing activation, not just registration, but participation. And I think that's the road that we all agree we want to be on, is seeing a better, more inclusive democracy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll now go to my colleagues for their questions. My colleagues will have 4 minutes for their questioning. I'll start with the lead co-sponsor, Councilor Louis-Jean.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to thank this panel. I'm just here just feeling so privileged that we get to do this work of democracy building, and you all spoke to it in your individual capacities. And so I could sit here and listen to you all talk about democracy all day, because I think this is what it's about, right? I forever talk about how we are in this project of democracy, and you both exemplify it. And I think ranked choice voting is that forward-thinking approach about how do we continue to build on that. So I'm sort of like geeking out and just like very, very happy to have this esteemed panel before us. I want to talk about, and anyone can address this question, maybe you, Josh, but it could really go to anyone. How does ranked choice voting and support for ranked choice voting vary among like political alignment? So like Republicans and Democrats, if anybody sort of has an understanding of like how people perceive ranked choice voting or the results on elections?
I'll start with my thoughts. In terms of a partisan opinion about ranked choice voting, I think over the years it's been mixed. I think the greater opposition, if you will, to ranked choice voting is those that don't want a change to a system or rule set that maybe produced the results they wanted, and if they perceive that it would produce different results, they're suspicious of that. And honestly, it's usually incumbent power that is afraid of being disrupted because of something different. Although what we see actually in results is that the outcome of ranked choice elections aren't significantly different in a partisan sense or even in a power dynamic between incumbent powers and not incumbent powers. And so the actual impact is very low. And so it's really more of a perception problem. And I think it's changed over the years. So our experience in Utah is that our Republican Party used ranked choice voting for 20 years in their nominating conventions, and we're very familiar with it. And there's been some recent opposition to ranked choice voting that comes from Republicans simply because in one state that was using ranked choice voting, in a very purple district, a Republican lost. And it's like, well, it's a swing district. Sometimes Republicans going to lose, sometimes Democrats going to lose. And I don't think ranked choice voting makes a significant impact in that regard. So I think perception is really just about power, and those that are in power or not in power have opinions about what they think will or won't help them to win. But in terms of the actual partisan impact, if you actually look at the data and you study the results of ranked choice elections, there isn't a significant difference in the outcome in terms of power. I think it has a lot more to do with the way that it allows voters to be more expressive about their preferences.
Thank you. My next question is for Councilor Pelletier. Thank you so much for being with us. I think having you both as a practitioner and as an elected is really important, and your testimony was really powerful. I worked on the first federal, the second congressional district in Maine when we first used that RCV there. I want you to, if you could talk a little bit, or anyone could talk a little bit about ballot exhaustion, how you address the concerns where a voter's choice may not be counted in the final rounds because they ranked fewer candidates, and how should we understand what that means on sort of their vote or the value of their vote? And how much do you see that, and how would design of a ballot impact sort of how the outcomes there?
Thank you. I think I can speak for Portland in ballot exhaustion, which I haven't really seen as it relates to ranked choice voting. I think overall there's just voter apathy and lack of voter engagement because people are just feeling exhausted prior to ranked choice voting with the democratic process of a winner-take-all election. And so what I have seen actually is now that we do have ranked choice voting, I have seen more engagement at the polls. I have seen more individuals actually wanting to make their voice heard because they actually have more, because they have more options and are able to rank their preferences in order. So I feel like for me and in Portland, it's been a little bit of the opposite, where I think because now we have ranked choice voting, people aren't feeling so unheard by the process of voting and say, well, at least I can go in and I can rank my top 3 or I can rank my top 2, and I don't feel like I now have to choose between 2 candidates that don't see my best interest. And I think with the conversation around exhaustion, with the conversation around just voting in general, I think a lot of that as well falls on myself and my colleagues as elected officials to really have those conversations with our constituents of saying, is it ranked choice voting, or are you just exhausted by the process? Are you just tired by, thinking about who's on the ballot? Are they representing my interest? Are they not? And so I always try to steer it back to, at the very least, that the selection will be the will of the voters. And at the very least, when you go to the ballot, you at least know now that you can choose in order of preference, and you're not left with choices that maybe you don't identify with. So, I haven't seen a lot of exhaustion as it relates to ranked choice voting. I think it's more just with the overall process, the overall democratic process of people feeling like they're not heard. And I do think with having ranked choice voting in Portland, it has really bridged that gap between people who may have not felt like their voice would be heard to now being able to go in and say, well, at least I know that I have options and I'm not limited to, again, 2 candidates that may not represent my best interest.
Also, just to add, currently our system sort of sometimes incentivize, or you might be benefit from bullet voting. With ranked choice voting, if you bullet voted and the person that you voted for got eliminated in subsequent rounds, essentially your ballot would be exhausted. But I think that as voters become more familiar, I think that'll sort of go away, as people will be less likely to bullet vote, because then they'll understand that I'm essentially exhausting my own ballot if the person I support doesn't get enough support and gets eliminated.
That's my time. I'll save.
Thank you so much. Councilor Mejia?
Thank you. And thank you all for being here and bringing in the heat, because this is what we need in these times. And, you know, I think that when, Mr. Hall, when you were talking about the waiting your turn, that was me in 2019. There were 2 Latinas that were thinking of running at the time, and I was the least palatable. And people literally tried to counsel me out of running because they did not want me to impact the outcome. And I didn't have the resources, and I didn't have the name recognition, and I didn't have the political machine behind me. And I said, it doesn't really matter. You know, I'm still gonna run with heart and love for the community that I wanted to make sure that I amplified. And it wasn't just about running to win. I always said I would rather lose and uplift my people than win and neglect us, right? So it wasn't just about winning the election. It felt, for me, far more than just that. And it really goes to show this whole wait your turn, because had I waited, then democracy and the 15 pieces of legislation that I've passed would have waited. And I think that that's what representation is all about. And this whole idea of what is palatable and electable is also, I find, offensive, because I come into this chamber as I am all the time, with all of my imposter syndrome and the chip that I have on my shoulder, because I don't have the resources and the pedigrees and the degrees to be in this space, but I still show up. And I think that why this is so important to me is because what it does, it creates an opportunity for everyday people who deeply care about their community to say, I can throw my name in the hat and put my name on that ballot, and know that this exercise is to inspire other people to go out and vote, whether I win or not, right? So I see this as not just, yes, it's increasing representation, but I think it also gives people an opportunity to have a little bit more of hope, and to have people understand that their vote did matter, whether their candidate of choice didn't make it to the top, but they went out to vote for somebody who they thought had a chance. And I think that that is what is on my heart when I hear you all speak. And what worries me about the narrative, and I find it to be a bit offensive, is that we don't understand how to vote. And this whole idea of people being confused, right? I think that that is a bit stereotypical, because what it says is that low-income communities are not educated enough to know how to vote. My mom never made it beyond the 3rd grade, and she's a super voter. Okay, she struggles with reading and writing, but she knows who she wants to pick. And sometimes I have to help her go through the situation, but my mom is a super voter. So this whole idea of it being complicated, I think it's just another tactic to delay. So with that, I'm curious about what you can share with us to help put people at ease, because it's really not about power hoarding. It's about power sharing. And can you help us articulate that in a way that my colleagues who might be on the fence could jump on the other side and say, let's give democracy a try here?
So first, let me just say that you were who I had in mind when I made those remarks explicitly, but I also know that that lands with a bunch of other people because I've heard it and I've seen it. It's important that you are here despite the fact that you were told to wait. And there are plenty of other people who didn't wait, but they didn't win either, but could have been here and could have made significant contributions, but because of the way the system is set up, didn't have the chance to win. So we're fortunate and thankful to have someone like you, Councilor Mejia, to be in this position because of what you've done, campaigning even, not just as how you have governed, but how you have campaigned. And I think that's something that is also important to bring into the conversation, is that this shifts fundamentally the way that people campaign for office, because it's about lifting up the things that are valuable and important and trying to reach across and reach as many people with good ideas as opposed to vilifying opponents. I think to your question or request for ways of talking about this that kind of eliminates or puts to bed this sense of confusion, I think the examples, particularly that Josh gave around taking a ballot into a room and letting people figure it out for themselves, and they figured it out. I think the individual anecdotes that people have about being able to know what they want first and know what they want as the alternative makes perfect sense. I say this to my detriment. I'm from Denver, Colorado. I'm a Nuggets fan first, but you better believe that when the Celtics are playing, as long as they're not playing the Nuggets, I'm rooting for the Celtics. So, and I think it's that simple. I think the empanada example that we gave is a perfect example. The Jamaican patties, right? We'll take it to what people know. If people like whiskey, we can go Jameson's, we can go Uncle Nearest. But there are practical examples that people can talk about and use. But I think it's also important to point to the examples in other jurisdictions where it works, and people aren't running out of the polling location saying, I don't understand this, and democracy is failing now.
Can I add something very briefly? Another thing that I want people to also think about is the fact that we know that across the state of Massachusetts, let alone across the country, every ballot can sort of look different. We have arrows, we have circles, we have bilingual ballots in some municipalities, and in some municipalities we still don't. So the fact that a voter's experience and what their experience is going to be walking into the booth is really fundamentally too about like the sense of community and access to education, about understanding ballots. The City of Boston, my understanding is we provide ballots on the website. I believe it used to be 3 weeks prior to an election. And so there's an understanding as well that like if you're a new voter or a newly registered voter or coming from another place outside of this country, you're coming with your own lived experience to the voting system as well. And so there is a perception that we can't make assumptions about someone's ability to step into our process, right, or this process. We need to be making space for more. I often tell folks I'm Puerto Rican, my particular country and my family, we have one of the highest voting populations, voting, se me fue la palabra. We have a high voting percentage in terms of participation, one of the biggest, highest in the country, right? And we have policies in place that design that. We have Election Day as a holiday, people who are incarcerated vote, so there's reasons. And it's also celebrated, and people understand the value and the power of their vote. And so if this is going to open doors for people to actually step into a process that feels less complex about how do I choose, and more about I can actually make these decisions myself after meeting the candidates or getting an understanding about where their issues are, then we're already also winning in that way. It's less mystery in terms of this way, our way, versus the understanding that is intuitive about this person spoke to my issues, this person was actually made eye contact with me the whole time, really listened to me, right? All the qualities and the values that people take into consideration when they're voting. And so we want to focus on that. And I think ranked choice also makes that better based off the experiences that some folks are having right now. In terms of removing barriers and making things more accessible. So there is that perspective, and I thank you, Councilor, also for uplifting the story of your mom. Because yes, I think there's many stories like hers in our communities that we deeply appreciate too, so.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Mejia. All right, we will go to Councilor Santana and then Councilor Weber.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much to our panelists for being here. And thank you, Councilwoman, for being here. I went to high school in Maine, so I went to Freiburg, Maine, not in Portland, but I really love Maine, so I really appreciate you making the travel here and seeing the representation out there as well. I do want to touch on a couple of things. I think, Rashawn, the wait your turn, I think really resonated with me. When I ran, I challenged 4 incumbents at the time, and that's the message I got. Wait your turn. It's not your time. There's 4 incumbents in there. You're going to split the vote. There's another Dominican in there. We're both here, right? So that's wait your turn was not in my cards. I do want to talk about incumbency, right? I think you touched on, and I think a couple of you touched on how this has impacted different races. And I think a lot of times when people, candidates want to run or residents want to run, they see an incumbent there, and it's like, it's impossible for me to win. How does ranked choice voting, I guess, give less of a chance for an incumbent to maintain their seat or to really challenge them? And I think, can you speak to that, or anyone can add maybe? Can you speak to that? Or sorry, I don't mean to drag out the question. Are there any examples of a place where ranked choice voting has been implemented and an incumbent has been taken down?
So the data that is out there shows that RCV doesn't eliminate the incumbency advantage. It's a hard thing to eliminate, but what it does, it makes you have to work for more votes. The data suggests that if a popular incumbent, if you're a popular incumbent, you'll have no problem winning. Actually, you'll probably get more votes because you're able to get second and third votes from other people. And with our proposal, advancing the top 4 for district would essentially it would eliminate an attack vector, essentially. Like if you had like a well-funded opposition that was trying to put 2 candidates to finish ahead of you, that may be possible, but it's nearly impossible to advance 4 candidates to finish ahead of an incumbent. So that's...
No, I appreciate
that's
that.
one answer.
I appreciate that clarity. I have 2 questions, so I'm just going to ask them, and then you both can answer it. Or Josh, I know you touched on, and I think Ed as well, the idea that the bullet voting, right, it has decreased, and I understand why it's, well, I don't understand why it's decreased. I understand what you're saying. Why has it actually decreased? And I think when bullet voting, I think that really comes from incumbents and from candidates, right, pushing like that narrative to residents and to voters. It's not necessarily, from my experience, voters saying I only want to vote for one person. So why has that decreased? Does it actually have to do directly with ranked choice voting, or are there any other things that that's been done in that sense?
So I think that the reason that it decreases is twofold. Number one, there's no strategic advantage to bullet vote in ranked choice voting like there is in the block plurality system. And then to your point, therefore, candidates and campaigns are less inclined to encourage that strategy amongst their supporters. So I think what happens is because the strategy is not promoted, it's used less. The other thing, though, is that when voters see that they have the opportunity to rank all the names on the ballot, they actually take that seriously, and they actually look into the candidates and formulate opinions, and then they utilize all their ranks. When you only have one box, so to speak, or bubble next to 8 names, it's a little bit easier to just say, oh, I'm just going to pick the name I want. Or, oh, I know these 2 names, I'll pick these 2 names, I'm done. The ranked ballot itself really invites the voter to think differently about their vote and to formulate opinions about all the candidates, which increases engagement of those voters with those candidates. I've seen candidates report to me that they've had far more outreach and engagement with voters in ranked elections where they were maybe a not so well-known candidate, they were a newcomer, and all of a sudden, people are taking them serious because they have to decide, well, are you my 3rd or 4th or 5th or 6th choice candidate? Which is really kind of cool that happens, because a lot of times candidates, especially new candidates, they get ignored if they're not well-known already. So.
Great, thank you. Really appreciate the expertise of this panel. I wish we had more time, but I know we're running late, so thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I am being cognizant that we have a 2 p.m. hearing after this, so I'm trying to be as respectful as possible, but also knowing that there's some more business to attend to later on. Okay, Councilor Weber and then Councilor Pepin.
Sure, yeah, just following up on that, I was going to ask the councilor from Portland, how the experience and the ballot box has changed for you and for other people in Portland with ranked choice voting.
Thank you so much. Also, Freiburg, you said? Oh my God, I was just at the Freiburg Fair. I go every year, so I love that. I love seeing another Mainer in this place. So, okay, I will gift that title to you. So thank you so much. So in terms of how it's changed at the ballot box, I mean, I think we've talked about this a little bit, but there is a lot more voter engagement from the voter side because they feel like now they have additional candidates that they can rank. So voter education has grown. People feel a little bit more inspired to actually go and make their voices heard, knowing again that they're not stuck between, again, two of the same candidates that aren't reflecting their best interests. And so there is, and I don't know that I have the specific data for this, but since we have had ranked choice voting in Maine, more and more individuals, at least in Portland, that I've seen are actually going to the ballot. And that happened in my race when I was running. I was in a 2-person race, but with some of my colleagues where ranked choice voting really came into play. A lot of people who either stopped voting or hadn't voted before were actually going back to the ballots to make their voices heard. They felt like candidates then reflected their issues. There were more women, there were more people of color. They felt like they identified more with who was running because there was an option for ranked choice voting. And then I think on the other side of it, speaking from my perspective as an elected official and helping some of my colleagues campaign, there was a greater responsibility for us to reach as many voters as possible. And there was also a greater responsibility for us to keep the election process and the campaign process as civil as possible, because you really want, if you're not going to get the first place votes, the second place and the third and the fourth, those votes are still so important. And so, I think I heard that there was concern around collaborative campaigning, and I actually disagree. I think that that was really exciting in Portland for us to see individuals being able to run on a slate, people who are women, people of color, people who weren't able-bodied, being able to make their voice heard like never before because there was an option for collaborative campaigning. So we've seen quite a change. Again, in Portland, our council, as I said, is the most diverse that it's ever been. We have the most women that we have ever had. And I think a lot of that is due to ranked choice voting and the excitement that I think has been brought back into Portland of the fact that we do have this really great voting system that is slowly, I think, kind of getting more and more popular around the country. But being privileged in Maine to be one of the first ones to have it and use it for years, I do see more and more individuals feeling like they can make their voice heard and wanting to actually show up and vote than before.
Okay, thank you. I guess, Mr. Shoemaker, so you participated in the 2020 ballot question, or were you working on that?
I wasn't on that campaign.
Okay.
I've been on the advisory board for Voter Choice Massachusetts since 2016. And I was actually working here in the Board of Elections for that election.
Well, but there was over 60% of Boston supported ranked choice voting in the ballot question.
Correct.
Is there any, that was a statewide question, here's the municipal, is there any, should we use that as a guiding, to guide us here as to what people want in Boston? Or?
For sure. It definitely demonstrates an overwhelming support of ranked choice voting. But what we're asking the council to approve, right, is just an opportunity for the voters again to weigh in on this, because you guys passing it, the mayor signing off on it, and it going to the State House isn't the end of the road. It has to go through the State House and then ultimately back before the people. So essentially, this just gives the voters an opportunity to decide if they want to move forward with this electoral reform.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Councilor Weber. Councilor Pepin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you so much for the panelists that we have here today. It's really an honor whenever we have such a diverse set of speakers, because when I say diversity, just where you guys coming from professionally. It's very refreshing to hear your perspectives on this matter. Counselor, it's good to see. It's good to hear that it only took you an hour and a half to get here. Something that takes me an hour and a half to get from Hyde Park to City Hall. But I actually got the chance to meet one of your colleagues, April Fournier, in Chicago and learn about the great work you're doing in Portland. My first question is to you. Not sure if you have the answer for this or if you could help me get it. What has the turnout been ever since ranked choice voting has been used in Portland, Maine? Have you seen an increase or has it been steady?
I don't have the exact information for you, the number, but I can certainly get it for you. But I will say, just from my perspective on voting day and my experience being a councilor in Portland, we're a very small, mighty, politically active city. So people like to go out and they like to vote. And I think with the existence of ranked choice voting, because for my election, just personally, I was very much campaigning and running in a group of people that were younger people of color, people that felt like they weren't being heard by government. That was kind of my crew. And a lot of people who voted for me hadn't voted in years or were voting again for the first time. And so that felt really great. And similarly with Councilor Fournier, who's a friend of mine, I love being able to serve on the council with April. Her race, she actually did have an upset and outseated an incumbent in her race as well. She ran during the COVID-19 pandemic, did an incredible job, never held office before. And a lot of people were really inspired by seeing a woman of color, seeing somebody that, again, really reflected their interests. And so in a time as well where she couldn't do doors because of COVID-19 and really had to make her presence known in other ways, people were turning out to the polls like never before. And I think it's because they felt so much relief that they were able to rank her and not have to say, okay, well, I have to choose again between, one or two candidates. And so I don't have the specific numbers to say, like, here's the increase percentage-wise, but I can say that when I go to the polls, when it is voting day, people feeling like, okay, how am I ranking? Having conversations, that's very common, of saying, like, where are you ranking this person? I'm ranking them 2. Are you doing 3? Am I doing 4? So those conversations are happening very often. And I feel like with that, there's a level of excitement and a level of positivity that didn't exist before, because people feel like at the very least they know their vote's going to be counted. They know that vote is not going to be split, that vote is not going to be wasted, and they know that even if it's not their first or second choice, it is going to be the will of the voters, and that's something that we've seen reflected a lot in Portland.
And just to follow up on that, with my testimony, submitted a lot of data and research. Part of that is a new study that showed actually using Boston data as a non-RCV city, comparing the turnout with non-RCV cities and RCV cities. It showed an average of 17% increase, which is, I think, we only have 13% sometimes show up, so that would be an amazing increase.
Thank you for that. It's refreshing to hear that your experience is that new people show up to vote. That's what we want to do. I think to Councilor Mejia's point, we're always trying to bring in different voices into the voting polls. My last question, I see I have 20 seconds left, is regarding campaign money, campaign financing. Obviously, it costs a lot of money to run for office, and usually, the person with the most money wins. What has RCV shown in regards to the candidates that get elected because of ranked choice voting? Is it still the case that the person with the most money wins, or does it allow there to be more flexibility for someone with less resources to potentially pull an upset?
Yes, so studies have shown that ranked choice voting decreases the influence of big money in elections. Also advancing more candidates, moving sort of the contest to be more in the general, also helps candidates who might have less funds spend it on the general instead of sort of spending a lot of money just trying to get past the preliminary. You're able to save and utilize most of those funds in the general election. So it helps with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I do just want to mention Ed did provide us with a lot of information, and it is in the folder that I referenced earlier. And my question to you is because one of my questions had to do with this very point. Is that statistic that you referenced, is that in the materials that you provided us that we can review?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. Thank you. Councilor Fitzgerald?
Thank you, Chair. I feel like my line of questioning is going to be a bit more challenging as we don't have sort of another side to listen. I feel like I sort of have to play the role of the other panel, and I do that at political peril. So why don't we just get right in. I've got a list of concerns that I want to just throw out to you guys. I know we got a short time, but I think my biggest fear overall is that it produces mediocrity, right? Where, okay, the person you want didn't win, or the person with the most votes doesn't win, and you get that second, third, maybe fourth person down the line. And across the board, yes, they have the broad coalition of everybody sort of going for them, but in terms of inspiring the voter turnout or voter participation, everyone's kind of like, meh, okay, like that's the person we're with now. And does that actually turn them off in the long run? I've heard some data otherwise, and I appreciate that, but still a concern I'd like to voice. Sort of the camel is a horse by committee, watered down. Are we getting the best leader out of the group for the election? And I heard you said it encourages more diverse candidates to run. That's great. The current system has produced the most diverse council in history. So I'm not sure how much, right, like, what is the end goal? I think the current product shows that it can work, right? And we can have a diverse body as we do today under the current system. And I wonder if everyone voted, just say for the sake, we had 100% turnout all the time, would the need for ranked choice voting still have come up? And I don't know the answer to that question. I just pose it. I'll give 2 minutes to respond. I'm sorry. And then said before, city elections are nonpartisan, so isn't it already ranked choice? We're just not digging as deep down the voter poll to pull people up. And my another concern being, I can see, I know we've talked about running as a slate and stuff, but right, to get a bunch of this is what I could see. There's some way to manipulate every election, no matter what rules we put in. Someone's going to come up with a way. And here I see it as like, well, if we just get a bunch of like-minded people and say, we'll rank them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that will outweigh the one person on the other side, and they will not be able to be represented. But then they'll catch on, the other side catches on and say, well, we got to put 7 people up and everyone just rank them 1 through 7 so that no one on the other side can go. And now we've got, 18, 20 people running in every election, so you can sort of outweigh the other. And again, I'm just thinking of this now, so please bear with me, right? And then at some point, like, history repeats itself. It's going to come back and it's going to say, this is getting too diluted, too confusing. Let's just take the top 2 and we'll come right back to where we are today, right? Those are my list of concerns. I know you can't answer them all now, but I want to make sure I aired them.
I just wanted to
You're okay. You're on. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much.
No problem.
And also, these questions, they're valid. I think being able to be receptive to some of the concerns is valid. That happens in Maine as well, so I appreciate it. I think just the one part that I was jotting down, and then I'll let somebody else kind of dive in. But I know you had mentioned, are we getting the best leader or is it meh? And I think, I would probably argue that with a winner-take-all election as well, like, are we getting the best leader or is it meh? Is it somebody that has been an incumbent for years and years and isn't really producing results anymore? Is it somebody that's been comfortable in that seat for years and knows that they're going to get elected time and time again? And so I think my response is, with ranked choice voting, at least we have the opportunity for more people to run that couldn't run before. And again, we have had elections where they're not my favorite candidate, whether they are a leader or not. I know I'm not everybody's favorite counselor in my council body, but I do think that argument of, are we getting the best leader or not, I don't know that is specific to ranked choice voting or if it's just in general, are we getting the best leader? I think if we are opening up the playing field to allow more individuals to run, and I also think that's a little bit subjective as well, because what you think is a great leader and what I think is a great leader could be different. So I don't know that is really like a ranked choice voting thing, and I think that argument could also be placed on a winner-take-all election. Are they actually doing a great job? Are they a great leader? Or are they just comfortable in this seat, not being challenged because of a winner-take-all system? So I just wanted to touch on that point, but I'll open it up to my colleagues for additional comments.
I think in terms of the question around diversity, yes, this is the most diverse city council that we've had in the history of the city, but how long did it take to get this? Yeah. And how long will this last? And as we look at the changing demographics of the city, as people can't afford to continue to live in the city, that does not mean that the people who remain, people who are living in poverty, people who are from communities of color, don't deserve to have the representation that we currently have now. So I think just because it's good now, there were significant hurdles to get here, and it doesn't mean that it's going to stay this way. I think this process of creating a broader field and more opportunity to vote for the people that they believe represent their interest, as opposed to the one that is the most electable, or the one that they'll hold their nose and vote for, or the one that has more backing and support and has a better chance of winning. Having ranked choice voting ensures that we get a more representative and diverse body of governance. I think in regards to gaming the system, right? Getting a slate of candidates to run and ranking them 1 through 7, sure, somebody could do that, but the amount of work that would take to actually disrupt the system is akin to the narrative that's used about voter fraud by identification or misidentification, meaning sending a busload of undocumented immigrants to the polling location to vote as someone else. One, that has not happened. Two, the amount of effort that it would take to manipulate the system like that is not, the juice is not worth the squeeze. And so I think pulling together the amount of candidates and manifesting the campaign platform to get enough people and reach enough people to be in agreement with that 1 through 7 slate is going to be outweighed by the legitimate candidates who are running. So we can create all kind of, not conspiracy theories, but potential threats to game the system. But the amount of work that it would take to make that happen just doesn't resonate with the reality of what a normal election, the resources that exist in a normal election and the people who will already be running.
And just to tack on, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to address the concern you brought up towards the end there about the idea of it incentivizing more candidates to run as a strategic thing. Yeah. Something to think about is that preliminary election is when you first see the total number of candidates that chose to run. And that preliminary election under this system would not be a ranked system. So you're still just voting for 2 or 4 names in this case. And so whether or not more candidates ran because of a strategy, you wouldn't be ranking them anyway in the preliminary election. You would only see the total number of candidates in the general where you'd rank those. So presumably, let's say 8 is the limit on the at-large. So in other words, I don't think that whether or not it seems to incentivize more candidates running, the strategy that you were implying could be employed wouldn't work, essentially. Because you're not ranking in the preliminary. So you don't need a team of 7 to sort of outnumber the one of the other one. But I think that the notion that you're thinking about, which is that you change the system, you change the rules, it changes the incentives and the strategies that will be used by, and you were kind of implying, 2 factions, which is one of the problems I think ranked choice helps solve, which is that one of the structural problems in our system in America, whether it's the city system or not, is it tends to reward polarization. And polarization has been a major problem. And so I think the actual nature of a ranked choice election disincentivizes polarization because you gain less from that toxic tribalism where you have these 2 factions competing because the winner is the winner that is rewarded by creating a coalition. And which I think goes to your first question, which is, oh, well, do we end up with a coalition of mediocrity? Well, in my experience, seeing outcomes of races, generally speaking, the candidate who was in first place after just counting the first choice elections, which would be equivalent to a plurality system, that candidate still tends to win. Except when they don't. And when they don't, it's because that particular candidate tends to be more polarizing and there's a coalition in opposition to that candidate. And so generally, you don't necessarily end up with mediocrity, but what you do end up with is a check on the incentive to be polarized and tribal and uncivil, because those candidates who are the most polarizing, even if they're quite popular, let's say 42% really like them, you're going to also end up with about 53% that don't. And so you'll have a coalition that'll oust the most polarizing type folks and the winner tends to be still a leader of a coalition. But I think that's what's important about ranked choice voting is it incentivizes a coalition mentality about how you campaign, which changes the nature of what you're talking about. You tend to focus more on issues and genuine differences and less on tearing down the other candidates. Because you're rewarded by building a coalition, you're not rewarded by simply knocking down all of your opponents, which I think is one of the real challenges in American politics.
Well, thank you for taking the time. I appreciate the education, and thank you for letting me ask tough questions.
I just want to tack on as well. Democracy would still prevail in this situation because it would be the plurality in the beginning, and the eventual outcome would need to be a majority. So regardless of what happens, it's going to be an outcome that the majority of the voters wanted. So.
Understood. Thanks, Ed. Thank you all. Thanks, Chair.
Seeing that we don't have Councilor Braden with us, I'll dive into my questioning. I did have a question about voter turnout in municipalities, so I appreciate you elaborating on that. You did mention, one of my questions had to do with bulleting, which we know is a political strategy, because I cut my teeth in this world on political campaigns, and so immediately my spidey senses went to the bullet. And so I know that you were talking about this, and the plurality of voters, the plurality of candidates is important. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit more clearly from my notes? I know I can listen back, but
Yep.
some of my subsequent questions has to do with your answer.
Yep. So essentially what I'm calling bullet voting is where a voter votes for fewer candidates than they are permitted to vote for. And that can also apply in ranked choice voting where they rank fewer candidates than they're able to rank. But if you think about an at-large election right now where 4 winners will be selected, in the general election you get to vote for 4 names. So what you look at is you say, well, are voters actually choosing 4 names, or are they sometimes choosing less than 4? And certainly some voters say, I just don't want to do the work of learning about 8 candidates. I know these 2. I want them. I'm going to vote for those 2. Certainly that happens. But there is a strategic advantage for some candidates to say, hey, just vote for my name, or just vote for me and Susie, because, if you vote for 4 names, it's possible one of my other opponents might get more votes because you liked them as well. Mm-hmm. And so there's this strategic advantage to vote for less than 4 candidates. And in the last election in Boston for the at-large seats, the number of votes that went unutilized that could have been utilized was like 29.9%. It's basically almost a third of the votes that could have been cast. That's pretty high. And what we saw in Utah, where we have similar elections like that, where you have at-large, you might have 3 winners, we calculated the number of those blank votes year over year compared to a year when they used ranked choice voting. And when they did ranked choice voting, the number of those unused ballots, so to speak, reduced by 4.5 times, 450%. And interestingly, we had one city that used ranked choice voting first and then didn't, and we had one that didn't and then did. And so we could compare the effect kind of both ways, before and after. And I just think that it's really a dramatic reduction in that bullet voting, which is great because you're eliminating a strategic incentive for voters to disenfranchise themselves. And so I think that's an amazing advantage to ranked choice balloting. And I think what you would find in Boston probably is a similar effect, maybe a 4-time decrease from 30%, maybe down to only 10. And what that would indicate is people had ranked, let's say, fewer than 4, because you would want to rank at least 4, potentially all 8, right?
Thank you, and I appreciate that clarity. It's helped to answer some of my questions. It is a prevalent political strategy in Boston. I think we all know this. I'm saying the loud part, or the quiet part out loud, and so it is not fully representative of the people of Boston. So to hear that there was a decrease in some of the unused ballots, I think is compelling for me, and just know that to this panel. We have some incredible political minds here, and so I know that some of you will understand what I'm about to ask, and it is not to be tough or anything like that. These are just real concerns that I have, understanding kind of both sides of this world. But through this initiative, I understand that it is our goal, and you have to reach as many voters as possible. And understanding the fundraising aspect of it, You only have, on a campaign, you have limited time, money, resources, volunteers. That's all encompassing. And so to reach as many voters as you can, you need more of those resources. Unless, I know that you had talked about this, unless there is some coalition building, which I think is the point of this. And I think I want to be clear, I'm a huge Stacey Abrams fan. I think expanding the electorate and democracy is important for all of us. I am just worried about the unintended consequences of trying to reach as many voters as possible and what that means for folks who don't have access to these fundraising networks. Like, what have you seen, if you've seen anything, what has those impacts been on those folks?
I can answer that. That's mine.
Is there a challenge that you've seen, or is there no challenge at all of folks that don't have access to these networks?
Yeah, so folks that have grassroots support, perhaps maybe less money. I'm thinking about a candidate like, or an elected official like Councilor Julie Mejia, who has the proportion of dollars per votes. I'm sure you've done this calculation afterwards, how many votes a person got versus how much they raised and spent. It showed that she had a lot of grassroots support, and it took a lot less dollars to get her votes out as compared to some other candidates. So, you know, somebody has coalition support, grassroots support, would definitely sort of, you could swap that out with having a lot of money where you can hire field organizers. I'm sure Councilor Mejia utilized a large amount of volunteer supporters as well, things like that. So, I mean, money does help in elections, obviously, as we know, but like I said previously, it decreases the impact and the role of the money in the elections. But it doesn't mean you have to reach more voters and work harder to do that, so.
I think another point to make is that a lot of times candidates lament the engagement of voters because from the candidate perspective, you're spending money reaching the voters and you sort of wish the voters would try to reach you. You know, I've run for office and it's like, well, I mean, the voters should look in, shouldn't they be calling me to ask? You know, it's like, no, you got to go out there and talk to them. But in ranked choice elections, some examples and candidates I've talked to were actually surprised by the degree to which voters actually did reach out to them because the voter now sees their role as not just picking a couple names, but rather formulating opinions about all 8 candidates. And so for candidates that don't have a lot of money, simply your social media presence, your, you know, thin maybe coverage by the media or your website becomes a lure for the voters to come engage with you and learn about you because the voter now feels more responsible that they have to formulate an opinion about all 8 candidates. And even though they don't have to rank all the candidates, a lot of voters, just the psychology of looking at that ballot, they believe that they have a responsibility to rank all 8. And that's actually a good way to think about the act of voting. And so I think for those candidates that are unable to reach all the voters, they are likely to get more engagement from voters who view their responsibility to rank all 8 to formulate an opinion about you as a candidate. And so I think that's a counterfactual way to think about maybe the upside of ranked choice balloting, where, yeah, it is hard to reach everybody in Boston, but you know, maybe there's a little bit of an advantage because voters now think about their vote differently.
Yeah, can I just add something very briefly here too? Yes, no secret that I've worked on a lot of campaigns and specifically first-time candidates, women of color. So I really appreciate that question, and I understand also what that could look like for folks that are putting their best out and want to have the best chance. So it's valid, right? But I would also say that we've seen candidates that raise the most money. There's been numerous races where the perceived frontrunner had twice the amount of committee funds and did not win, or did not impact or reach the voters in the ways that they thought they would. So just piggybacking a little bit off what you're hearing from Joshua, but also again back to fundraising and the reach. How we talk about reaching voters in the ways that we choose to reach voters, in the ways that we want to engage voters. And I think critically about RCB is this concept, right, that like back to how voters think. I have to make a choice, and it's going to come down to the perception that there's only like 2 people, right? And what they're hearing from other people, or being told that they can't they can't really go in that booth and vote for the people they want to vote for. And I think ranked choice voting allows a space for people to be more participatory. So I think your response and sort of what Ed said, like the return of how we're using, or how candidates are using those dollars, actually feels like it can be used differently, and it could create different outcomes. And depending, again, back to the candidate, back to their platform, and back to the way they're also engaging with the voters in their respective neighborhoods. So I still see it as, and I guess lastly, I said I was going to be brief. Actually, that's not so brief. But on the other side of this is also what we've also discussed, and I appreciated Rasan saying like conspiracies, right, or these theories that people have about slates or funding or all these things. At the end of the day, again, we're saying that if this is about making sure that the process is more participatory, that candidates have better experiences, quite frankly, I'm biased, women will have better experiences, you know, and that at the end of the day, that we can be thoughtful about this moment that allows us to actually move forward, because there is momentum, there is engagement around this. I see the efforts of like expanding education on RCB, like it's here. So I think everybody just benefits from it. And I think the voters also recognize the difficulty with fundraising and will respond, you know, to candidates that are actually doing the work, that might have less access to bigger accounts in their committees, but are actually meeting people where they are.
Yeah, and I that's a well-taken point. Saw that firsthand in 2017 when I was a campaign manager for a candidate who was out fundraised 3-1, and the voters, at the end of the day, in my opinion, made the right choice. So excited for that. And in my mind, to me, because of that and other examples, we do have a majority woman council here. There are, you know, it is working, although that is not to say that RCV would make it better. I think I want to be very clear about that point. I know that I'm utilizing more of my time. I'm so sorry. I do just want to say, because there are going to be more conversations, there's going to be working sessions, and so I don't want anybody to say, well, you didn't say that that was an issue or you had concerns about it. I am going to be very clear that I would at least like to see some safeguards into the strategic strawman candidate framework, or what I think could be 20 versus 20, where people are putting up candidates as part of a larger strategy. I would like to hear at some point maybe assuaging my fears in a purple district where there could be potentially a swing in a way that people really wouldn't expect, where folks see a representative that reflects them and their values, rather than somebody who is good at making friends within the people who are running. I guess a question to you would be, how have you seen loyalty to candidates translate to loyalty to other candidates? Like, does this coalition building actually happen in practice rather than theory?
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, it does. The coalition building happens. But what's interesting is that sometimes the coalitions aren't what the candidates think. And there's more diversity of thought among voters. What I find is that voters tend to have strong preferences about, you know, their top 2, let's say. And then they start to formulate their own independent opinions about everybody else. And even if those top 2 candidates that they like are part of a slate, I've talked to many, many voters and seen many, many voting patterns that seem to defy what political insiders might try to predict about voter behavior based on slates and teaming up and coalitions and things like that. And so the political strategist in me is like, why aren't these voters doing what we political strategists think they ought to do? And then the democracy advocate in me says, gee, this is beautiful. This is exactly what we would hope, right? Is that the voters formulate their own opinions. And, you know, that's what I see actually happening. So I don't know that, and then to your point about this idea that there could be new strategies emerge about recruiting candidates to run to somehow water down the field. Again, just recall that for this system, in your preliminary election, you're still just voting for 4 names. And so there's no incentive or advantage for one faction to have more candidates from that faction. It's always advantageous to try to recruit fake candidates for the other side, but that's actually really hard to do. People talk about it in theory. I rarely see it actually work out. And more often than not, in other words, what I'm implying is that one faction tries to use the plurality system, which you'll still have plurality in your preliminary election. You use the plurality system to create the spoiler effect for your opponent. And more often than not, what I see happen is that the spoiler candidate tends to not be disingenuous. They tend to be real. So, I mean, the common example is a libertarian in a red state that is still fairly competitive, and you have a three-way race between, let's say, a Republican, a Libertarian, and a Democrat. And so you have a spoiler effect where the Libertarian draws right-wing oriented voters from the Republican and the Democrat wins. The opposite happens in blue states with Green Party candidates, right? Third-party candidates. But this idea of the spoiler only works, I think, when your candidate that's the spoiler is truly supported and running for their own reasons. It rarely works that one side recruits a spoiler to try to undermine their opponent. And in the case of ranked choice voting, in both cases, ranked choice voting eliminates the spoiler effect and disincentivizes that type of behavior. So I really don't think you're going to see significant changes in candidate recruitment and who runs for office. Those people still have to put their name and reputation on the line. They still have to pay a filing fee. They still have to go out and campaign. There was an actual example of this in Utah where in one city, advocates who did not like ranked choice voting, they recruited a bunch of additional candidates to run to try to dilute the field just to create chaos. And largely what happened was those candidates were ignored because they weren't genuine candidates who didn't run election. You know, they weren't running a real campaign, and they largely got ignored. And the race came down to who you thought it was going to come down to. There was kind of a top three competition happening, and largely that's where the votes lied, and the strategy sort of didn't make sense and didn't land the right way.
Thank you for that answer. And I know it's a shared goal of all of us just to make sure that our democratic process has integrity and it's being utilized in a way that's not being taken advantage of for one side or the other. So I appreciate you all for being here. Do my colleagues have other questions that they want to ask the panel? Okay. Councilor Lujan.
Thank you. And thank you to my colleagues for asking such great questions. I think you all explained it. I think in the plurality system that we have, there's more gaming that can happen, right? In this system, it's really about the majority preference of voters, and that winning out every time is going to actually prevent gamesmanship. It's going to make sure that we're electing candidates that reflect the majority will of the voter. The gaming that has sometimes that I think folks may be referring to a little bit is among the candidates, but I actually see this as decreasing that happening you can't eliminate it completely, but just significantly less. In our RCV model, we do retain a primary, and on the previous panel, they talked about how in some RCV models, there is no longer a primary. If anybody could talk to the comparison between RCV areas where there is a primary and RCV where there isn't a primary.
I'd love to, because this is the Utah example. In Utah, a lot of our municipalities choose to use ranked choice voting because it eliminates that preliminary election that you all have, what's sometimes called a primary, right? And that's because, so let's say in the example here in Boston, if you're going to have a limit of 8 total candidates for the at-large seats in the general election, would you have a preliminary election if only 8 candidates filed for office? And the answer is you wouldn't. Right? In Boston, you wouldn't. So you would save some money. Now, you're not predicting that you will always avoid the preliminary election. You're anticipating that you probably will have a preliminary election, maybe 12 to 16 candidates or something like that. So I think that basically, even though you're not aiming to say we're only going to have the general election, as many candidates as want to run can run. Maybe you'll have 12 in the general election. You're still anticipating having the preliminary election to limit your total candidates to 8 in the at-large and your general. I think that's wise. I think that's a good strategy. I think more than 8 candidates from a ranking perspective, I don't know that voters are going to really think about ranking 12 or 14 or 16. So I like that you're saying, look, we're going to limit the total candidates to 8 in the general. If that means that we don't need the preliminary election, great. But otherwise, we're going to plan on having it. So I think that's actually a really wise compromise, if you will.
And
Some
there's
of
a
our
system right now. Like last year, we didn't have a preliminary in the at-large race because of the number of candidates.
Right.
So there are some things like, yes, it's a novel system, but at the same time, a lot of things will just feel the same.
Right. Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think for smaller cities and in other jurisdictions, it is advantageous to say, why are we having a preliminary election so that we can reduce the candidates from 4 to 2? Like, we could just have 4 in the general and you could rank them, right? And so that's the reason some cities use ranked choice voting in a general election as a strategy to reduce the need for a preliminary election. I could see where that doesn't make as much sense for Boston. But if it happens, great, you save some money. But.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to also say that we, through a lot of conversations we had in the community, landed on that, because a lot of the times the ranked choice voting reform does include just wholesale getting rid of the preliminary election. But in all the conversations that we had with voters, organizations, civic leaders, it was pretty much unanimous that folks wanted to maintain the preliminary, and I mean, I agreed with them as well. Maybe I'm a little old school, but I do like the preliminary that we have here. I think advancing the top 4 candidates, gives obviously voters more of an opportunity. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do just want to say that we have to be done by 2 o'clock to give our central staff enough time to prep for the next hearing. And so with that in mind, I will respectfully ask my colleagues to abide by the time. And then for folks on Zoom who want to give testimony, we will start your testimony by 1:50 to end on time. Thank you.
That's a listen, the importance to this afternoon. So, it's so funny, Ed, I've never really done the research to see how much money I've spent to get a vote. So I don't know where that data exists, and I'd love to see it and share it publicly, because I think it is a really great story to tell, that you don't have to be well-resourced to run a campaign. I think that information should be public, and I don't know where it is, but send it over my way. Not just me, just in general. I just think that it's important for us to recognize that democracy can work if people who are willing to work for that vote, go out into these streets, knock on those doors, because it was not easy to get here. And I also think it's really important, as we continue to have these conversations, I keep reflecting on the fact that the whole notion of participation is what gets people out. And I think that whether your candidate is going to win or not, the fact that you're expanding the number of people who are actually going out to vote is a good unintended consequence, a good problem to have, I think. And I think that we are at a moment in time that we have to start thinking differently about what elections are all about. My last cycle, I decided to run without political endorsements. I didn't want to undermine the will of the voters. So I decided I didn't want anyone to endorse me, and I wasn't going to endorse anyone. I also opt not to ask for all the union supports. I picked and chose the unions that best represented my values. And so that a lot of people thought that was political suicide. And I will say that when I had all of that support in 2021, I was only 400 or 500 votes from being the top vote getter. But when I went without all of that support, I still came top 3 with the least resources still in terms of funding. So I think that as we continue to have these conversations, it's really important to uplift that people are the ones that decide who gets into these seats, not dollars. And I think that it's really important for us to underscore that it's people, not political machines, that get into these seats, not political machines. And I think that the more we fight for democracy, the more we need to recognize is that whether people believe I'm palatable, is that the word, or not, I'm here. And the only people who can take me out are the people who put me here. And that is what ranked choice voting does. It creates opportunities for people who are somewhat disruptive to show up and represent their communities. And I think that that is why people are afraid. And I'm sorry to say that it's people like me that often makes it harder to come in here because people don't want to hear this mouth. And I think that part of the equation is what gets people uncomfortable because then they have to look at and listen to people who don't talk like them, who don't show up like them, and who push because I've been told I'm too aggressive, I'm assertive, I'm sometimes even a bully just because I fight for my people. And those are the sort of things that I think should be part of these conversations because it's about privilege and it is about labeling who has the right to serve. And that is why I'm going all out for this particular home rule petition because if we're really serious about changing the game, we have to be serious about who is refereeing it.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Does anybody have additional questions? Councilor Weber?
Okay. Yeah, I just, again, thank you, everyone. Just my attorney brain trying to think of like, what are the arguments on the other side? A scenario where somebody finishes, in a 3-person race, somebody finishes third, could win the race, could win, correct, under this proposal?
If there were 3 candidates and they finished third, then no. Because
Okay,
they would be the
4.
first one eliminated.
Okay.
But yeah, if there were 4, the person who comes in fourth, once they're eliminated, if pretty much everybody that voted for that candidate maybe chose number 3 as their second choice, then there is a theoretical way in which that third place person could leapfrog the second place person. If the second place person had a similar effect where all of those second choice were for this person, then yeah, essentially you would build a coalition behind candidate third place to really ultimately be the winner.
Okay, but so that's, again, like if you have 2 candidates who are very polarizing and you've got somebody who finishes third out of 4 who is actually trying to do the work and get people together. I don't know, how would you respond to somebody who's like, well, this system, somebody...
I like to think about it, what you're describing sounds to me like an election between vanilla ice cream, burnt almond fudge, chocolate, and chocolate fudge, right? In other words, 3 types of chocolate, 1 type of vanilla. And if you look at the electorate, and the electorate says, hey, 55% of these people want some kind of chocolate, but 45% want vanilla. Okay, so if you have 3 flavors of chocolate and 3 styles of chocolate and only 1 style of vanilla, well, of course, vanilla comes in first with 45%. But 55% of the people want chocolate. And they have different preferences about what version of chocolate. But they're ultimately going to coalesce behind the most favored version of the chocolate ice cream so that if you only have 1 ice cream for the group to share, it's going to be the 55% coalition behind chocolate ice cream as opposed to the 45% minority or plurality of the vanilla. And that's what happens when you have sort of what you call vote splitting, right?
Okay, now I'm hungry. Chair, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, Councilor Braden.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologize, I had to step out for another meeting. So I often, there's a lot of mystique around your ballot position, place on the ballot. Have you noticed any impacts of where, we all love to be top of the number 1 on the ballot, but Has there been any research into how that impacts ranked choice?
I'm not 100% sure. That's a great question. But I will say for the city of Boston currently, we do it with the bingo machine to determine the ballot order.
Yeah.
But that's a good question to look into.
Yeah.
Unless somebody else has an answer for that.
Can you hear me? Okay, there we go. So for Portland, for Maine, we do it by alphabetical order of last name. So I was last on the ballot. It didn't have any impact on me. I think that it's still, people will go in knowing how they want to rank for the most part. Yeah. So seeing where they are in the ballot, depending on their last name, it's still kind of like going one by one and saying, okay, first, second, third. So, I don't have any specific data on that other than my personal experience, that it didn't have any impact.
Yeah, I think alphabetical order by last name seems like a rational way to go.
Braided.
And then, I'm still trying to. If you have 7 or 8 candidates running for a position, like not at large, but a district seat, there will be a preliminary rank choice that would winnow the field down to the last 4, and you'd have a preliminary and the last 4. Is that correct, or would you just keep them all in and just go the whole way through to November and do it that way?
No, so the preliminary would be plurality, similar that we have now. Instead of advancing 2 candidates, it would advance 4 candidates. Mm-hmm. And the at-large would still advance the top 8. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then rank up to 4 for mayor, district, and at-large council. So voters are never ranking more than 4 people.
Okay. Yeah, it keeps everybody on their toes then the whole way through November. That's fine. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And also, it's really important as well because it shifts, again, like I was talking about earlier, it shifts the contest more to the general election. Research has shown in the city that people that turn out in the preliminary, which we all know is disproportionate to people that turn out in the general, is often a wealthier, whiter demographic who turns out and then sort of selects the final choices for the entire city. So advancing the top 4 would essentially give the general election voters more of a say in who they want, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. And focusing on issues rather than, getting into the weeds and negative campaigning and all that stuff, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it changes the focus away from, like, do I like this person? I mean, obviously that's a factor when you're deciding who to vote for, but it really puts the emphasis more back on issues rather than, like, personal attacks and, all that good stuff.
All that fun stuff, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Josh, do you have a 30-minute answer? Oh, excuse me, 30 seconds.
It will be within 30 minutes.
That's
but yes, 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
One of the things candidates in Utah reported really liking about ranked choice voting was that when ranked choice voting facilitated the elimination of the preliminary election. And this could happen in a district election here where if only 4 candidates filed to run for office, there would be no preliminary election. And candidates liked that because they saved money. They didn't have to campaign during that preliminary cycle. And they could just, work towards the November cycle when, to Ed's point, more voters are participating anyway. And so a lot of candidates liked that, and they felt like it maybe saved them some money because they didn't have to run a campaign earlier in the year.
Thank you very much. I do have one last question. So understanding that next steps, if this were to pass the council and then be signed by the mayor, what does the status of this look like at the State House? Do you have a sponsor? Do you have a coalition already up there?
Yes, so we have, who's going to be filing it is going to be Sam Montano and Chris Worrell, the representatives. We're looking to expand that as well, but it would go to the Joint Committee on Election Law before it gets a vote and then sent to the governor's desk, which would then put it before the voters. Hopefully, if everything happens the way we hope it will, the 2025 mayoral election, this will be a non-binding referendum that gets added to it, but would trigger the implementation of ranked choice voting.
Okay, great. And then I apologize, one last legal question. We don't have any worry that this conflicts with the state's constitutional requirements for certain elections, right?
No, it doesn't conflict with state elections.
Okay, that's it. That's it for me. Do we have anybody online? Okay, they're gone. We also have Doug Chavez, who has signed up to provide testimony. Doug, state your name, your affiliation, and you have 2 minutes.
Doug Chavez, I represent myself, the Chavez Group. I'll be quick. I want to thank Madam President for her support, Councilor Mejia, Councilor Santana, and the other city councilors who have been so supportive. I'm passionate about this because I've always been about increasing the diversity of candidates of color and women, to run for office. This does not just that, but also participation. I have friends who are not political junkies like me in other cities who, once ranked choice was implemented, they were actually, and learned about it, they were excited to vote. So we're all about, in Massachusetts, about increasing democracy, making things fairer. People around the country look to Massachusetts when we were leading the way in marriage equality, healthcare reform. So a lot, honestly, is surprised that we have not yet implemented ranked choice. And I urge all the city councilors, I wish they were here, who are on the fence, to just listen to your constituents, to just look at the data. It increases. What is not good about increasing voter participation? There's nothing bad about this, and I would just urge you to have an open mind. I wish if this is all about you and you worrying about not getting reelected, then you have bigger problems. Regardless of this voting system we have, if you're a strong leader, if you're a strong elected official who represents a community, then it doesn't matter the system we're in. This is not about being a Democrat either, a Republican, an independent, a moderate. People from all across the spectrum support this. This is not about being Latino, black, white, Asian, or any ethnicity. This is about everyone, about increasing. This is not about being male or female. This is not about any gender identity, any identity. This is about making it fairer for people to be able to vote, for people to be able to run for office. So please, we're not even asking you to make this into effect right. Just give an opportunity for it to go to the State House. Please give an opportunity for the voters of Boston to vote for it. I urge you to please consider voting yes, and I urge the mayor to also support this. Thank you.
Next up, we have David Reno.
Councilors and whoever else is here, I will be brief. I am in favor of ranked choice voting. I would like to make one point, though, that I think may get lost. If you have ranked choice voting and the third person and the top two people do not make a majority, their numbers are not subtracted from, but can only be added to. I think this is a very important point, because when you say that you're taking the third person is eliminated, those votes are, the second and third are counted, but the first two do not lose any votes. It seems like when you think you take one vote away, you're taking other votes away. I'd also like to mention that if this can make a better democratic republic, I'm in favor of it. Somewhere it was decided that we should no longer study civics in high school. When was that idea done? How can a citizen who has many problems of their life, like not being the right height to testify, possibly make an intelligent decision if he or she cannot understand the difference between a preliminary vote and a primary vote, a congressional vote, or a presidential vote? I have been a veteran of being an election worker for 20 plus years, and if this can increase elections, I am certainly in favor of it. Ben Franklin, who did the opposite of myself, he came from Boston, went to Philadelphia. I've come from Pennsylvania to come here. Was asked by the wife of the mayor of Philadelphia at the Constitutional Convention, well, Dr. Franklin, do we have a monarchy or a republic? I'm sure you probably know his quotes, but for those who don't, he said, quote, "A republic, madam," and then the most famous pregnant 5 words, "if you can keep it." I would urge everybody hearing me to ponder those 5 words, "if you can keep it." I thank you for your time and interest.
Thank you, David. Next up, we have Johnny McGinnis.
Greetings, President Louis Jun, Chairs Mejia, and Chairs Zapata. I'm Johnny McInnes, the Political Director for the Boston Teachers Union, and also greetings to those city councilors that are present now as well. We are enthusiastically supporting the implementing top 4 ranked choice voting. With over 10,000 educators and school professionals in our community, we actively vote. We believe RCV is a vital step toward ensuring that every voice supporting our students and families is heard and valued in the democratic process. As educators, our primary goal is to advocate for the best interests of our students and their families. RCV allows us to vote for candidates who genuinely care about education in our community without the fear of wasting our votes. And more likely, graduating students might even rank their option as they do to choose for college. And another example is, if you want to choose the toppings for your ice cream that's going to go on there. And I'm cutting this short because of time, I'm aware. Our neighborhoods need leaders who understand the everyday challenges we face. RCV opens the door for grassroots candidates to shine and have a fair shot against more established figures. We want our elected leaders who listen to our needs, especially those of our families and students. At the BTU, we are committed to standing up for the needs of educators along with students and families. That's repetitive in what I'm saying here. We serve. RCV aligns perfectly with our mission by helping us elect officials dedicated to dismantling systemic inequities and promoting policies that support public education. And lastly, we urge the Boston City Council to adopt this electoral reform and join us in creating a safer, healthier, and more equitable society for everyone in our beloved city. The Boston Teachers Union is the largest single local union in the state of Massachusetts, so the impact of ranked choice voting has is significant from labor as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Looking at the time, it's 1:59. I apologize. We do have to close this hearing down. If folks were here for public testimony, you can also submit it via written testimony to the committee. I want to thank the panel again. I want to thank the Elections Department, the lead sponsors. We're going to waive closing remarks. This is going to a working session. At this time, we don't have a date, of course, but this will stay in committee, and look forward to future conversations. So given that, this hearing on docket 0996 is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.